and welcome those who are in attendance with us this evening. We will start tonight by having Councilmember Severie either give us some indication or thought of his choice, and then lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Council, I'm thinking about it. I know this kind of fell off with COVID. But if we could get some community members involved again, joining us and giving us a thought or education or Pledge of Allegiance, I think that'd be good. So just a reminder. With that, Councilmember Severie, you're going to give us a thought?
Yes, I'm going to give us an invocation.
Okay, great.
Heavenly Father, grateful to assemble this night. We're thankful for the incredible country that we live in and the freedoms that we enjoy, the liberties that give us happiness. And tonight, as we've met together, citizens and council, pray that thy spirit will attend us. The decisions rendered would be appropriate for the benefit for the citizens and all of us in this great city. Give thanks for our many blessings. We pray for those within our community who struggle with health and mental issues, perhaps, and other emotional challenges. May they be buoyed up and strengthened. Give thanks again for all that we have, and we pray for this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Will repeat after me the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Severie. We have several presentations this evening. John, I don't see Kevin or Camille. Are they joining us online?
They're not on right now.
Why don't we go to Frisbee Golf then?
Okay.
And see if they join us. If not, I think, John, I forwarded the information to you. Maybe you could take that if they don't.
Sure.
All right, Mr. Severie.
So Mayor and Council, a fine young specimen of a male in North Ogden contacted me recently. His name is Kyle Hunter. Kyle Hunter, being a former citizen of North Ogden and an avid Frisbee golf player, would like to present to the council the idea of creating an actual Frisbee golf course. Yeah, course. I wanted to say model, but that didn't sound right. Wanted to present about the idea of creating a Frisbee golf course in one of the parks, or perhaps even utilizing the 6 acres that is near the equestrian park at the east end of 2600 Mountain Road. So I am going to defer to Kyle, who forwarded a PowerPoint to John. And so listen with great intent and feel Kyle's passion for Frisbee golf.
All right, Kyle, you're up for your 10-minute presentation.
Thank you. I actually made copies here because I'm a school teacher and this is what we do. If I call you boys and girls, forgive me. I tend to do that when I'm speaking. I do that down here more often than that. But yeah, I just have a quick presentation. I'll try to keep this snappy about what I think would be something very special for my hometown. So, overview. Disc golf is a booming sport. You can say Frisbee golf, but disc golf is more common. There's a lot of demand from people in North Ogden to play, and there is no course in the city. They have to drive quite a distance. The Ogden area, the entire county even, is falling quite behind on development of disc golf to match its popularity, and North Ogden is uniquely positioned to help with this. So that's what I'm gonna pitch today. So quickly, what is disc golf? Disc golf is a game that plays just like golf, traditional golf, except you throw a Frisbee into a basket. Some courses are quite extensive and challenging, and the holes are really far. Some of them are quite short, and a kid can play. Ogden has actually a great disc golf history. We actually hosted the 2021 World Championships at the Fort Buenaventura downtown. They, millions of dollars were brought into the county, thousands and thousands of people came. It was a really neat opportunity. So disc golf, it's a great game and it's growing. Next, please. Thanks, brother. The problem is that the Ogden area is falling behind. So I have a map on the left of Bend, Oregon, which has approximately the same population as what I'm calling the Ogden Weaver area here. And as you see, they have about 3 times more golf courses than we do. Each of those baskets, the bigger baskets represents an 18-hole course. The smaller baskets are 9-hole courses. The courses are very, very busy. There's an app that disc golfers use to keep track of the rounds they play, to keep track of their score. It's called UDisc, and we can pull the data from UDisc, and we see that during COVID, disc golf boomed. It's a very cheap sport. Most courses are accessible to play for free. You just need a couple frisbees and you can go play. All right, thank you. Perfect. The number of disc golfers has almost tripled. It's gone down a little bit since post-pandemic times, but the numbers are booming. And I'll let you look more closely at some of these statistics and quotes if you're so interested, but for now, we'll just keep going. So a quick overview of what disc golf is available in the area. We have the Fort, which is at Fort Buenaventura downtown, and UDisc, which again, the app, recorded 10,000 rounds played in the year 21. Now that's just the rounds that were kept track of on the app. The city estimates that the number is actually 5 to 6 times greater than that. So the course is used every single day, literally 365 days of the year, blizzard. Some of these guys are crazy and they take it real serious. There is a small course in Harrisville, a little 9-hole course that is played approximately, I contacted the city, they said about 50 to 100 rounds a day. It's a small course, multi-purpose course, and they are feeling it. Weber State just pulled their 9-hole course to make room for parking. The first disc golf course in the area is in Riverdale. It's a 27-hole course. It's been here for 20 years and it is being developed. It is slowly disappearing as they develop it into housing. So not only are we not growing, we are shrinking as far as disc golf courses. So what's the solution? We should build an inexpensive, beginner-friendly, family-friendly course here in North Ogden. I have spent many hours, I'm a school teacher, I have summer break, don't judge me, looking for properties that can work. And I think I found a property that is great. There are many options, but I think I found one that is better than the rest. And that is this, the property that the city owns just south of the equestrian park. So I have a list of why I think this property is best. The city already owns it. We don't need to acquire anything. It's plenty big for a small 9-hole course for a family. It's close to the city. It already has bathrooms and a parking infrastructure. We won't need to add any new park infrastructure to accommodate the people. And it will be very, 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 very cheap based on the plan that I have outlined. And of course, it will be fun because I don't know if you've ever seen that property, but there's a lot of elevation changes. It's pretty cool. So to be clear, my course design is flexible. I have a tentative design that it will be accessing the areas in blue. Why not in red? Well, I contacted the city and they use that front part of the land as a soil deposit. They need to be able to get in and out as they need soil, and the power company, which you can see the big power grid up there, the power company uses that land to stage poles. So we won't need to use that land, we can work around it, which is why I'll be restricted to the blue. So what do we need to accomplish this? Just a few things. Baskets. This is the most expensive part. This is the part that is hardest to get. Luckily though, I know somebody that has 9 used baskets that will sell to us for very, very cheap. Tee pads. Some of the courses you will put in like a cement pad where you throw from. There's a cheaper alternative, which is just pressure treated 2x4s in the ground that just indicates where you should throw from. They're obviously a fraction of the cost. Signage. We'll need some signs for players to know where to go and how to navigate the course. I actually have a friend who owns a sign making company in town who's willing to donate all of the signs. And then man hours will be donated by me and I'm going to say team because it sounds cooler, but they're just my friends. We could of course upgrade this as if it becomes popular. There are lots of other things we could do to make it fun, but this is the bare minimum. Okay, already said that. Connections, already talked about the 2-way perfect signage. Yeah, so we want like a sign at the beginning that that goes over the course. They actually have QR codes now that you can scan it. It will bring up on that app UDisc, and it uses GPS technology to help you walk through the course. You won't lose your way. It really is very simple. Very easy for families. Price breakdown. So the baskets are about $2,000 for all 9 of them. To contrast that, a brand new basket is about $700 to $800 a piece. So the gentleman who owns these baskets, they were actually the baskets used in the World Championships, is willing to sell them to me for a good price. He's a good friend of mine. He loves disc golf and wants to see it grow. So the idea of a small family course is something he'd be interested in. I priced out the lumber roughly, marking whiskers so people know where the tee pads are, things like that. Signage, I put $150. That would, I think my friend said he would donate all of them, but if not, only 150. So grand total, we're looking at $2,200 for an entirely new park. Which, I like a deal as much as the next guy. And if you said you could build a park for $2,000, I think that's a pretty good deal. So who pays for it? Option A. North Ogden pays for it. This is the best option. The reason why it's the best option is that it would be expedient and it would result in a long-term commitment by the city and the Parks and Rec Department. It would not need to be maintained in the same way that a park would need to be mowed. There'd be no mowing. This is a natural property and it would stay that way. That's the fun of disc golf, is you can play in the woods. No need to mow, no need to do anything like that. Simply bathroom maintenance and bathrooms opening and closing, parking lot maintenance, that kind of thing. Something that's already happening. Option B, I have connections with the local disc golf club who would be willing to run some fundraiser tournaments, things like that, some raffles, and we could raise the money. Under this circumstance, the club would maintain ownership of the baskets and they would, so to speak, be on lease. That way, if the city ever decided to use the property for something else, the baskets would then just go back to the club, if that makes sense. Whereas if in option A, the city would keep the baskets, you love the course, you want to build a new course, you have 9 baskets for a steal, you can move them, you can expand, they would be the city's. Okay, some quotes. I emailed a few people to get some quotes here, and these are my favorites. So Johnny Crenshaw, a disc golfer, says he loves disc golf, but he has to drive all the way to Riverdale, downtown Ogden, and a closer course would mean a lot to his family. Todd Peters lived here for 10 years. His whole family loves it. It's a cheap and simple way to get outside for his family, and a course in North Ogden, he said, would be excellent. So summarize, disc golf is fun. I don't know if you've played it. It is fun. It's growing in popularity. It's very safe. It's very cheap. And we have land. And I think it would be awesome to use it. A note, I think this land is great. However, if the city is interested in other properties, obviously I'm just a guy looking at satellite imagery. If there's a better piece of property that Parks and Rec or the council has in mind, I am just excited to bring disc golf to families in town. There are many ways we can pay for it. And lastly, thank you for hearing me. Are there any questions?
Council, do you have any questions? Councilmember Valdez.
What is a marking whisker?
Oh, good question. Sorry. So a marking whisker is basically a tent stake with plastic whiskers that you stick in the ground, and it basically is a way to cheaply and non-invasively demarcate land. So you would put them around the baskets, so that way people know where the basket is. You put them by the tee pad, they just kind of stick out almost like a little flower. I mean, you could maybe cycle back if it's not too complicated. Keep going, there. So they go into the ground. The one on the top left is fully installed, and those whiskers just allow people to know where to stand to throw. So if we put a 2x8 in the ground and put some whiskers on the side, we would save a lot of money on signage, because the app will tell you where to stand, the whiskers tell you where to start, and then from there you proceed to throw and throw and throw until you make it into the basket. And move to the next hole, the next hole. Again, I don't know if you've been to that property, but it's got really neat elevation change. There's trees, big rocks. They're clearly not using the land. It's quite wild. The trees are about 25 feet tall. It would be fun to play in. I've actually gone out there a couple times and played what would be the course, and it's a hoop.
Council, any other questions? I failed to mention, by the way, I think Councilmember Ekstrom is online with us. So, Councilmember Barker?
I'm guessing the baskets are pretty permanently installed.
Oh, great question. So they can be or they cannot be. There's a couple ways to install them. If the city wants them to be there, they're there. They often will do a big typical cement post, and then they're very permanent. I recommend that you use what they would come with, a steel sleeve that you drive deep into the ground, and then the basket goes in and then locks in. The chances of these baskets being vandalized is very, very low. Even at Fort Bonaventura, they rarely deal with vandalism. They go into this sleeve and they lock, in theory, they could be wiggled out of the ground and adopted, taken. But the chances of that is very low. So I would suggest that we sleeve them until we like the course, until the layout is good, until we're confident that we want it. And then if it is something that we want to move forward with, then we can look into cementing them in the future. The problem with, they make them with stands, but those can just be pushed right over. And that some teenagers would enjoy that a little bit.
Any other questions? I don't think we're in a position to make a decision this evening, but this will give us some food for thought. And we will be getting back to you.
Okay, I have all your emails. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. I don't see Kevin. Did they say they were coming, John?
I didn't talk to him. So,
Okay, well, you can, we'll go ahead with the CTC presentation, and maybe you could just scan through that information that was sent. Council update to citizens.
Yep.
All right. Evelyn?
How are you guys today?
The company you're hanging out with, how's that going?
Oh, we're doing good.
it's going downhill really fast.
Okay.
what he was alluding to.
Evelyn, go ahead. You and
Awesome.
Councilmember Swanson.
Yeah. All right. Well, so I have been invited by our lovely Councilman Swanson to come propose to you a concept that Weaver CTC has. You've interacted with us a little bit. As a little reminder, we are your local prevention coalition. So we're working on preventing underage substance use and promoting mental health. Those are our two big things that we work on. So today we're talking to you about the Live On Suicide Prevention campaign. Weaver CTC has some funding to sponsor putting some of the campaign into one of the areas that we service, and North Ogden would be one of those areas. So talked a little bit to Phil, and we put together a little bit of information for you. So John, yeah.
Sure. So council, as you're aware, along Washington Boulevard, we have our Heroes Boulevard, right, with banners. They're 5 years old now and they're looking pretty tattered. They need to be replaced and refreshed. And as I've been thinking about that, Madeline gave me a call and she talked about this Live On program that is being sponsored by Bonneville Communications and the state. So it'd be no cost to us. And it's an opportunity for us to, during the month of September, to have some kind of an outreach, a publicity outreach that is part of the Live On campaign. And so just a little bit of data, and sorry to really kind of bring the crowd down as we talk about suicide here after talking about disc golf. Disc golf is a lot of fun if you haven't played it. In Eastern Weaver County, which is where we are, not the entire county, just Eastern Weaver County, 33 people have died by suicide since 2017. Go ahead, next slide, John. In the state of Utah in 2021, just in 2021, 507 men died by suicide. So on an average of 42 men per month die by suicide in the state. For women, it's 103 women died in 2021. Next slide, John. With our youth, the Student Health and Risk Prevention Survey that all of the kids take, and the new data will be coming out in 2023, 47.6% of our students in the Weaver Cone, grades 6, 8, 10, and 12, meet the criteria for depressive symptoms risk factor. So it's a rate of 43%, nearly half of our kids are reporting, self-reporting the risk factors that play a huge role in suicide. 22.8% of the 8th, 10th, and 12th graders surveys reported that they had seriously considered attempting suicide in the past 12 months. It's a pretty staggering number. Age group in Utah from 2019 to 2021, these are the top 3 age groups by gender for the rate of suicide. For men 18 to 19, 48.5% per 48.5 per 100,000. 75 plus, 47.8, and 45 to 54, 45.4. So if you combine that 18 to 54, middle-aged men, that adult male, middle-aged. Do the math there. We're pushing nearly 100 per 100,000 that are committing suicide, and many more are attempting. For women, 45 to 54, we have 16.2, 35 to 44, 12.3, 55 to 64, 12.2. Next. This is just a general look at males versus females in various age groups from ages 10 to 14 all the way to 75 plus. You can see there is a huge disparity between suicide among males versus females. And there are lots of, research and data about why. We won't get into that. I will tell you I don't have a slide on it, just on an aside, the attempt rates are about the same. They're nearly the same across genders. It's men are just more successful, if you want to use that word with it. Go ahead, next slide. So the prevention campaign is a collaboration with BONCOM, Bonneville Communications, the state of Utah, to promote the Live On Suicide Prevention campaign throughout the Weber-Cone area. The Live On is a statewide effort to prevent suicide by promoting education, providing resources, mostly getting the message out that there's a reason to live and that there's help if you're in that situation. The Weber CTC in this program that we're promoting will install messaging at high traffic and high risk areas and purchase promotional signage and materials for community events and other activities. I thought this would be a great opportunity for Washington Boulevard, considering that the banners would be paid for. Go ahead, John, go to the next, please. So a simplified timeline, the first thing that we would do is reorganize a family service member committee that would start gathering names for those that either have had their service members out on Washington Boulevard or perhaps did not have an opportunity the first time and would like to. This time we'd start collecting those names, the photographs, so that we could, with some private funding, that we would get those banners made. And towards the end of the year, we would put new banners, fresh banners back up, okay? In the interim, we would remove those service banners, give them back to the families. We would then install the Live On banners. They would remain up through September, possibly October, and maybe the first week of November, with the service banners going back up the week of Veterans Day. I think that'd be a great way to honor our veterans, to put those service members back up on our Heroes Boulevard. I've got December there, but talking to some of those that would be involved on the private side, they mentioned this afternoon that November around Veterans Day would be a great time to put those banners back up. John, you've got some slides there, some pictures of what some of the banners look like. If you can open it. There it is. So what we would envision is that the banners would be two-sided. On one side would be an image of an individual, not an orthogonal individual, but we would have signs of encouragement, signs that are part of the Live On campaign, like ask how they're really doing. Asking simple questions can make a huge difference. Go to the next one, John. If it'll let you. Okay, so this is just an image of an individual that would be up there, and these don't have to be the images. We could use other images of individuals. Go ahead and go to the next one, John. Just keep clicking. There you go. Check up on each other. Again, messages of encouragement for everyone to be involved. It isn't just about getting a message to someone who's in that place where they feel suicidal. It's about you and I taking the proactive step to ask the questions that may elicit that conversation that ends up saving a life. I'm fine is your cue to ask more. Ever thought about that? When you're working with those who have suicidal ideation and suicidal tendencies, the I'm fine and the I'm good is often the I don't know how to talk about it. I don't know how to bring this up. It's an uncomfortable, difficult subject. So when you hear that and you've got that gut feeling, I would encourage us all to follow that gut feeling and start doing a little bit of kind crying. I'm okay, I'm good, I'm fine. Go ahead, next, John. Talk openly about mental health. It's okay to talk about how you're feeling. It's okay to talk about those times when your mental health is not the best. Right? That's how we let others know, especially those of us that are in leadership and public positions. It's how we let the general public understand that it's okay to talk about it. It will make a difference that way. So these are the kinds of banners that we'd be looking on. We'd be working with CTC and Bonneville Communications and the state to get a finalized design. Those banners would go up and they would be all along Washington. So that as you're going down, you might see the talk openly about mental health, and then you see an image of an individual. And then you say, I'm good, as your cue to ask more questions, or whatever the banner says. And so as you're coming and going on Washington, these banners would be up there. So council, that's what I'm asking for you to approve. Along with me, you know I'm behind it because I'm up there giving you the presentation. But we would love to do this and get everything ready and rolling so that we can have these banners ready to go up in just a little over a month's time. Any questions?
Councilmember Seven, go ahead.
Yes, I think this is an incredible idea. So let me just, so I can understand, would these banners be, would they begin, for example, if you're traveling southbound, then the first banner is going to say something like concerned about suicide. Maybe the next banner then says something else. Here are questions you could ask. The next banner. So are they going to be educational as you move down from banner one to the final banner?
That's a possibility, absolutely. There is no limit to how we want to stage this and how we want to create that message. And so that would be part of what we do here in the next probably 3 to 4 weeks is get that. How do we want it? Where do we want? How do we want the banners to read? What do we want them to say? Work with Bonneville Communications. They're the experts in getting that message out.
Great.
And then we would establish how that's staged and the order that they go.
And then northbound would be the same thing. You just see that first.
Might be a
one.
different message
Maybe
coming
different.
northbound, a slightly different message
Or
No,
series.
I love the idea.
or a series of messages because we have quite a few light bulbs out there.
And I would love to even donate like my videographer to maybe kind of do a video about this before we actually put them up so that people are looking for them maybe.
That would be great.
I think that would be good. I think when people see those banners coming down,
That's part of the messaging is we have to get that.
we
message
have to
out.
get that out there. We don't want them to think we're not patriotic.
That's correct.
Um,
And we could use your videographer for that as well.
We've got it. I'll
And-
donate
and-
the video.
And I can make I've got several contacts with news agencies, with Alex Cabrero and several others that I'm sure would love to come up and do a story on this. And Mayor, we can get your face in front of the camera
we don't
and
do that.
explain what's happening.
People
Great
turn the
idea.
TV off. So, Mr. Swanson, when the banners go back up,
Yes, sir.
is that burden going to be upon the military families, or how are those going to be replaced? Is there a way to, hate to see that happen to them? and-
From us, what do you mean by burden on the family? Actually physically placing them?
No, financial burden when.
No,
they-
no. I'm already working with several individuals. We'll be raising the money to pay for that. Like was done the first time.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Councilmember Dalpas?
It seems that some of the military banners are in pretty good shape, so just keep using those if they were in good shape and discarding of the ones that are in bad shape, or what's the
We'll
intention?
be taking them all down, giving them back to the families and then doing the whole fresh batch.
Okay,
That really gives an opportunity for everyone. It'll be dependent on the small committee that gathers the names and gets the photos, whether or not it's a first come, first serve type style, where anyone repeated or new, it's just first come, first serve, or do we give preference to those who didn't have an opportunity the first time? And if we don't fill up all the polls, then those that would like a repeat could be on a first come, first serve. That can be worked out very quickly. and
I
easily.
like the idea of giving everyone a chance, those who didn't get a chance the first time, who would like to this time.
Sure.
I'd like to see them have some priority. I think,
Certainly.
gives them that opportunity.
Does that mean you're willing to chair the committee?
Well, we're happy to help. I'm a believer in this concept here. My wife started the suicide prevention activities some 30 years ago in the county, so we're big supporters of this. I think that I like the idea. As long as we can get that word out that we're not taking the banners
Absolutely.
down to.
And I'll start pushing that out on social media now through my own pages. And some of the community pages, so that people understand they're looking forward to the opportunity to get their loved ones back up there when that time comes, and then are looking for this Live On campaign that will be showing up in September.
Right. Any other questions? Okay, keep us posted on that. I think I'm seeing support for that.
You got a thumbs up?
I think it's thumbs up on that.
Okay, I'll be getting together with you next time.
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. John, do you want to just go over the sewer board information for the council and the, since you may be interested?
Sure. So the sewer board is essentially proposing a tax increase. They went through and talked about how things have changed for their sewer plant, including an increase in the amount of water they receive, or black water, depending on how you want to look at it. And then also there's an increase in the amount of EPA regulations that they're being exposed to. There's higher and higher demand for clean water to exit those facilities, as opposed to some of the more, I don't know what's the right word, medieval approach maybe, but it's expensive. And then also there's been some increases in price of goods. You've heard us talk about chlorine in our city has gone up significantly. They're showing an 184% increase. And then their natural gas costs, for their processing and stuff and to run their equipment has gone up as well. They've got lots of miles of pipe. They have compared themselves to other agencies across the Wasatch Front to get this information for the averages, the average flows and things. And they're fairly efficient compared to other agencies. But anyways, they basically are saying, hey, we need to increase taxes. The average home price in the county or in the district that's served by this is $477,000, and the individuals receive a $16 a year increase on their taxes. So instead of roughly $10 a month, they'll be going up to what is that, $11.50, something like that. So there'd be an increase. That's what they're proposing. And there is a public hearing that'll be held on August 14th at 6 p.m. at their offices out on Pioneer Road. And they're doing this by way of to get information out. I believe the board requested that the sewer district do these presentations so that they could get the information out to residents, and just make sure people are informed so they know what's going on and are able to have a chance to voice their support and concerns.
Yeah, I think the public would like to comment. Public hearing is on the 14th at 6 p.m. EPA is a big part of that. And construction costs have just spiraled, and of course, sewer district bonds and interest rates are up in the 5 and 6%. I think they wanted the citizens of the public to know. In addition to the property tax increase, as Councilmember Swanson presented as part of the budget, there's also an increase in the service fee that was passed along that we got to pass on to the citizens. So anyway, John, thank you very much, and we'll report back to the sewer district that we did discuss that. Now moving to our consent agenda. Council, you've had a chance to look at the agenda this evening. Is there anything on there that would warrant disclosure of a conflict of interest, either real or perceived?
Yes, Mayor, I need to recuse myself based on item number 12.
All right, I see no others. Thank you, Councilmember Severin, bringing that to our attention. I had a chance to consider the May 2nd, 2023 City Council meeting minutes. Are there any corrections to that before I seek a motion? I see none. So I'd be looking for a motion to approve the May 2nd, 2023 city council meeting minutes. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Delpas.
I second.
Second, Councilmember Severing. Is there any further discussion on the issue? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? See none, motion passes unanimously. Also, on our agenda this evening, we have two more minutes we'd like to approve. Those of the May 9th, 2023 city council meeting. Is there any corrections on those minutes? I'd then be looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the May 9th, 2023 city council meeting.
So moved.
Councilmember Barker has made a motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Swanson. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll now move on to consider the May 23rd, 2023 city council meeting minutes. Are there any corrections to those minutes? I don't see any, so I'd be looking for a motion to approve the city council minutes of May 23rd, 2023.
So moved.
Councilmember Swanson has made a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Severing. Is there discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. We'll now enter into our active agenda. We'll now seek comments from the public. Just if you'd help the mayor out, and please limit your comments to no longer than 5 minutes. Sometimes it's uncomfortable and I have to interrupt. If you would step to the podium and state your name. If you're a resident of North Ogden, we'll now have public comments.
Hello, my name is Brett Jones. I'm a citizen of North Ogden. I'm supposed to give you your address, is that an old thing?
We'll let you.
Awesome. So I won't even need 5 minutes. I'm looking to build a detached garage on my property. And we submitted for a permit about a month ago. And we have some really interesting rules and regulations in North Ogden around detached garages or kind of large sheds or anything of that nature. So I wanted to kind of figure out how we can call some attention to it. One of the weird things about it is that if I attach my third car, well, I guess it'd be a fourth car garage to my house, which is an option, but I don't want to do that. I can put it in the exact same spot and put it 10 feet away from the property line and go 35 feet tall. And that's just totally fine with everything. If I don't detach it, I have to go 16 feet away from the property line to get to 21 feet. So it doesn't really make sense. So a couple of things that I would want to call some attention to is we've been working with Scott a little bit on this, and it would seem like it makes sense that if you could build an attached garage in the same spot, why couldn't you do a detached garage in the same spot with the same rules? I mean, if you're looking at line of sight regulations or something like that, one of the things he brought up was, well, maybe you're ruining someone's view, whatever. That might kind of wonky anyway, because you're like, well, if someone builds a house behind me, they ruin my view of watching the deer every night, but it's not my property, so who cares, right? Not much I can do about it. So I'm more or less just trying to kind of figure out if there are some ways that we can make this make a little more sense. I called the planners for Plain City, Far West, Harrisville. I called Kaysville, I called Layton. None of them have rules and regulations near ours. I think the most strict one I found was like 5 feet as a starting, but not 10 feet as a starting point, and then a foot for each foot you want to go on height away from the property line. It just seems a little bit unreasonable. Anyway, I don't know if there's a process that we can look at towards changing some of these things. I don't need to take too much of your time, but that's kind of why I'm here and what I'm looking to figure out.
We appreciate it. Councilmember Delpaz, I would ask you maybe to sit down. I know we review this somewhat regularly since I've been here, but always good to have input. We don't think of everything. So would you meet with Mr. Hess and see if Mr. Jones's concerns can be addressed or not?
I will talk to Scott and we'll make sure that we're
And
looking
then
at the,
Thanks.
you will communicate back with Mr. Jones?
yes,
Scott?
yeah.
Awesome.
Done?
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for coming.
Chris Colver, North Ogden. Just had a comment about the Weaver Sewer District, and I can't remember. So we had talked about a lot of stuff during the budget stuff of that we were doing, kind of helping them by doing the repairs that we're doing on the sewer line. I didn't know if there was any credit that North Ogden itself was getting as a result of that, because I know we were talking about that, but I didn't know if that was something that had actually been worked out, or, I mean, because it just seems like everybody in the county is getting the same percentage.
Yeah, and you would be surprised on how they allocate the cost to the cities. Has nothing to do basically with usage. Has to do with assessed value and population. I do sit on that board with other mayors from the county. They looked at metering, so they could charge on usage. And I think it was like $9 million to install meters. So the approach that's still being considered, even though Ogden City has the right to veto anything, is the fact for those who are relining sewer, because what that does is reduces the amount of flow, particularly when we have wet winters and the water seeps in, to see if we can give credits to those who are doing that, because we are spending a lot of money doing that. So nothing yet.
Okay, I remember that, I just didn't know if that was in this year, so, okay.
Like I say, Ogden City has veto rights, and when you look at how it's charged, you can see why they want to veto.
Okay, and then the other thing was the other thing on the agenda about the storage unit going in. I couldn't find any, because I know we talked about it, having something like little shops or something in the main office thing. And then, you still have the pictures that look like that, but I didn't see it anywhere in the written legalese that was in tonight's agenda. And I didn't know if that was something that the city council is imposing or pushing, or something to do that, but.
I think Mr. Hess will be reporting on that later in the agenda, so
Okay,
hopefully he'll answer that question.
all right, thanks, that was it.
Okay. Oh, Mr. Hess, did you want to report, Mr. Jones, on that?
What's that? I would love one. I'd love to figure out what we can do.
Okay. Anyone else like to comment this evening? Doug?
Doug Anderson, North Ogden. Here we go. I have four things. The first off is I compliment the city as a whole on the minutes that are and kept. Volume and the accuracy of what goes into those documents is amazing to me. But I did notice one typo that I know it's been voted on. It's not a showstopper, but on page 4 of the May 23rd minutes, it mentions savings natural. That should be savings neutral. Just a typo, I'm sure. And spell check would not have picked up on that. It is written correctly on page 5. So anyway, that's the first thing. Second thing is I would like to compliment the whole city council, but in particular, Councilmember Swanson for a few weeks ago when the subject of deer control came up and a command, what I would call an executive decision was made to not act on that. I thought, right on. That was a good decision. I wholeheartedly agree with the decision that was made in a very short time. We didn't have to study things out, discuss it ad infinitum. Just made a decision, and I think it was the right one. So thank you for making that decision. Number 3, regarding the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't know if any of you have noticed this detail, but I think it's a small but important detail. But there is no comma between the words one nation and under God. There's no comma which would indicate a pause or a separation. And so when, and I'm saying this to everybody in the room, please note that when you say the Pledge of Allegiance, it's not one nation under God, etc. It's one nation under God. It's one phrase, no comma. That should be said accordingly. Number 4, I'd like to suggest, having heard the presentation on the banners, an idea occurred to me, and I know a decision was not made tonight. Maybe consider this option. Rather than switch the banners out for the suicide prevention banners and then a few months later, put up the new servicemen and servicewomen banners. Do the homework, talk to the people who have the banners up there now. Figure out which ones you're going to do. I'm sure somebody knows the quantity of lamp posts that are available. But get that homework done. Get the new banners made and switch them at the same time. So there is no gap between the old worn service banners and the new ones. That will avoid having to explain why we're taking them down and putting up these suicide prevention ones, and then explaining maybe later why we're taking down the suicide prevention ones and putting up the service. No, avoid the explanation, just swap the banners in one fell swoop. Now, that doesn't mean that suicide prevention is not important. In fact, maybe this improves on that idea. Find another way to display the suicide prevention banners, maybe below, maybe additional lampposts. That way, they don't have to come down. Number one, you're not having any gap in the service banners. And this additional way of displaying the suicide prevention banners doesn't have to stop. It's not like in November or Memorial Day. It's not like suicide prevention quits being important. No, it still is important, and we continue to display those. So in a nutshell, summarize, do the homework, decide the names, get the banners made, swap them out in one fell swoop. There's no gap, no explanation needed. Everybody's happy, and put up the suicide prevention ones in addition. Maybe not banners, maybe posters, maybe something in the city magazine, some other way, so that the suicide prevention doesn't stop being important when we take those banners down. You see what I'm saying? So you have both of them going. Hey, I'm out of time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Sure.
Randy Wynn, North Ogden. I live in a position where I can observe the activities of Barker Park. And to me, it's been very gratifying the way our park is being used. The events last night were wonderful. People were enjoying. We have citizen groups that have activities there. In the beginning, we were concerned that big commercial events would come and really be a problem for our neighborhood there. That has not occurred, and it's just a lovely place. And as I was observing the activities last night and thinking what a nice thing it was for our community, the thought came to my mind to propose to the council that we name the amphitheater after Mayor Taylor, the Brent Taylor Memorial Amphitheater. Mayor Taylor started the idea, put the work in, followed that through. There was some controversy, but the controversy has not come to pass. The concerns that were had, I think it would be a unifying thing in our community. We talked about our veterans. Mayor Taylor gave his life in the service of our community while on leave of absence from his role as mayor. And I think it would be a wonderful thing to honor our fallen mayor and to be something that would unite our community. That was my idea, and I make a formal proposal to the city and the council to consider that, if you would. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment this evening?
Andy Cochran, North Ogden. I want to say that I love the idea of disc golf. I thought he gave a wonderful presentation. It seems really reasonable. They're even willing to raise most of the money, so I hope you all get together and meet and approve it and get back with him. And my son loves disc golf, so if it's here, he'll come visit me more often, so, but it is.
Is that a conflict of interest?
Well, if I was sitting up there, it might be a conflict. I can have any conflicts I want over here. And I had one other question. I'm just wondering if anyone is going to come give a wrap up or some kind of summary on the Cherry Days. Yes, okay. That's all I need.
The next
Thanks.
meeting.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeanette Sweet, and I am a resident of North Ogden. I am ill, so please forgive my voice and lack of air. I live up on Lakeview Drive, which if you take Washington Boulevard straight up the hill, that's where you run into Lakeview Drive. Right up above us, of course, is all the construction that's going on. And the area up there in North Ogden has seen a lot of change and dealt with a lot of issues over the years with the changes. Everything from flooding, which caused severe damage to a lot of homes up there. And Marriott did not have the proper SWIP, storm water pollution protection plan, in place. I have photographs to prove that. I have here residents who actually did suffer some of that damage. In addition to that, we've had the construction truck controversy and controls where they were losing the ability to control their vehicles, banging into light poles and brick mailboxes. And then because of that and the speed control going down the hill, the council approved the use of Jake brakes, which led to another problem with everybody working from home, or a lot of people working from home, to be able to deal with the noise. I've since then learned that Jake brakes should have a muffler on their trucks as well to help counter that noise. And that apparently has not been happening. We have the uncovered loads coming down. This woman right here came within seconds of losing her life when an uncovered load dropped a boulder this big and this deep right where she had been standing as she was clearing the construction debris out of her gutter. And Public Works was involved. They were up there almost immediately. I have pictures of it. And just 2 blocks down the hill, they had dropped even more. The covered loads are something that has to be dealt with. And I have a bucket at home full of the rocks that are currently being continuously dropped. Speed, of course, is an issue. Our street, I didn't get the measurement before coming here, but we have a center lane, we have a northbound lane and a southbound lane, and then we have the parking strip. Growth management, forward-looking council or planners built it deliberately for the growth of this city. But in doing so, that left us in a position of speeders having, or travelers having the perception that they can speed up and down that hill because they've got plenty of latitude and vision on either side. Top of Lakeview Drive, clear down to the road that goes to Weber High School. It's a straight shot down and they're using it as a training run. Or the cyclists are using it a training run. I'm not talking about just the casual family members out for a bicycle ride. We're talking about the individuals, groups, and teams dressed in their full suited uniforms, flying down that hill with no opportunity for us to even see them before they're there. And so we have continuously called, making requests for speed intervention. North Ogden PD has been tremendous at coming up and trying to catch them. But It has not happened. And you can imagine the dismay by us after 7 years of complaining about these situations since that build started, to find out that on 3900, a new development, very new development, has a digital speed sign located up there when we've been asking for it and been told budgetary constraints and et cetera. I got on the phone with your city engineer, Eric, and after having done research of my own to find out there was a whole plethora of mitigation things that could have been done to slow down those speeders. I mean, all we're doing is chasing our tails. We're sitting here making the phone calls to non-emergency or emergency, and NOPD's coming up, they're trying to catch people. But there's ways to mitigate that with something as simple as a painted crosswalk, putting out bump outs in the road, anything. So if the city's going to look at the growth and expanding these roads, but yet the traffic patterns don't warrant it just yet, please consider that for us, the citizens. I mean, we've got everything from now, we've got powered bicycles and powered scooters. And those kids are just, even the ones that aren't powered, they're out in the middle of the street flying down that hill. And I don't understand, after all the years of us, I've been here twice, if not 3 times, to address the speeding issue up on North Lakeview Drive. We've got fire hazards up there within 3 houses of my own home are 4 properties that are nothing but dead grass. And after speaking with, I don't remember who I spoke to today, I spoke to so many people, but if it's 6 inches or more, that's considered an issue. These homes do have that. One's got a pile of down trees back there. So on the 3rd and 4th of July, you can imagine how I and my neighbors felt in there. And the onus is on us to address all these issues. And we've been addressing these issues for 7 years. And they've been ongoing without proper mitigation to deal with it. Your code enforcement officer that I spoke to today, that I also learned was animal control and wears many hats, was absolutely wonderful, explaining all of the rules and et cetera to do so. But we have been at this for 7 years with very minimal solid resolutions. And so many of the residents, I'm not speaking for anybody in particular, but this is a collaboration of most of the people that live up in that area, North Lakeview Drive and the adjacent streets, are concerned about being just left behind, being overlooked, and things not getting addressed. We've been tolerant and dealing with all these issues since that construction started. And so what we are asking for, what I am personally asking for on their behalf, is that some members, appropriate members of the city council, other members of the departments, be it Chief Quinney, sit down with us, and Eric, sit down with us and hear the details of what our concerns are and help us get some resolution here. It's inevitable that somebody's going to die. We pull out of those streets and hit those 10 speeds coming down that hill. And we're not talking just, we're a 30-mile-an-hour street. We're not talking 35 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour. We're talking excessive speed down those hills. And I drove that 3900 and 4050 and the connection into Pleasant View. And that hill is nothing compared to what we're dealing with here in North Ogden. So up in North Lakeview Drive. So we're asking for some help with that and to actually sit down and for the members of this area to be able to speak to that.
All right, Jeanette, I'm gonna have to
You're
call
fine.
you time.
Thank you.
What I would ask, John, apparently Eric has some ideas on solutions that he's shared. If you would get with him and obviously Chief Quinney. And if you need Mr. Severin's help, he's available. But let's find out what Eric's solutions are and see if we can implement them. Okay?
Thank you.
Anyone else this evening? Anyone online?
I do have a raised hand from Christina Watson.
Okay, let's hear from Christina.
Hello, this is Christina Watson. I'm a North Ogden resident. I just wanted to agree that I love the disc golf idea. I think that could definitely unify and bring our community together. Something that we can add value to our community. And I also love the amphitheater. being named after Mayor Taylor. I think that would be a fabulous tribute. He was a great contributor to get that amphitheater there. I also just had a question about the suicide prevention signs. I think it's great that we give that kind of quality information to our citizens about suicide prevention resources that are out there. But I was just wondering if it was already discussed, maybe I missed it, of how long those signs were planning to be up. Is this like a temporary promotional idea that's going to be replaced a couple of years down the road? And the next ones are going to be substance prevention or something else similar? Or is this a long-term, did you have a timeline in mind? I love the idea of having the veterans up. I feel like that adds to our culture of the city, that we honor those servicemen and women that have dedicated time and their lives. And so I would just be sad if all of those were taken down, even for a short time or a long time, because I think that's something that is a pride that our community has of our community. Any type of traditions or cultures that our community can, be proud of the city that they live in. I think it's important to keep those. So I would definitely be a fan of having those suicide prevention signs, but maybe there's a way that we could combine the two, or add another bar, another rung that you can have both. But I think there would definitely be people willing to donate it if we were willing to either find a bond or donors to keep those servicemen and servicewomen banners up. That's just my opinion, but thanks for all that you do. Appreciate it.
Anyone else online, John?
Nope.
What else here tonight? All right, we'll move on then. We'll go to item number 9. John, are you making that presentation?
I believe they are here in the back corner,
All right.
the Weber FFA.
Let's hear from them.
Hello, my name is Nicole Morfin. I'm actually not a resident of North Ogden, but I teach at Weber High School. I'm one of the 4 agricultural teachers there. The reason why we are here tonight is to talk to you about the Junior Livestock Association in Weber County. This past year, the fair went under an audit, and it showed, if you look at those flyers that Libby just handed you, it shows that over $800,000 went through the fair system for our students, coming from auction sales and then the checks that were given to our students from the sale of their livestock. Because of those numbers, the auditor recommended that junior livestock split from the fair, and that happened in December. Because of that, the Junior Livestock Association were kind of on uncharted territory, trying to figure out the livestock sale and auction shows as a whole. We used to do that in partnership with the fair, and so now everything that the fair committee did, we are having to build that up and figure it out. Because of that, we are asking for $1,000 donation from each city to give us that buffer as we find our costs associated with putting on the livestock shows and the sale by ourselves. With me, I've got these 2 ladies that are part of our association that are going to talk to you about their experience.
Hi, I'm Libby Fife, and for the past 3 years, I have shown animals at the Weber County Fair. I've shown a goat and a lamb, and I do not have the land to keep these animals in my house, but luckily Weber School District has a space where I can keep my animals at a farm out in Taylor, right next to the new high school that's being built. And so I drive out there every day, I feed them, I train them, I clean out their pens. Through this experience, I've learned so many new things about raising goats, raising sheep, how to shear them, how to clip their hooves, just how to feed them, all those just basic necessities for goats and sheep. And I've also learned many like adult skills like time management, money management, responsibility for these things, for those animals. And I've just been able to have a really great time with this experience. And I've also made a lot of new friends through this. Thank you.
My name's Maddie. So this is my first year showing an animal in a fair. I'm raising a goat, but through raising an animal, through purchasing, I learned how to budget, how to keep the money for the animal to be able to afford it. Through going out to Taylor every day to feed, to work, I've learned the struggles of keeping an animal, but also the successes of working with an animal and getting to know it and being able to eventually show it at the fair and take it and hopefully sell it. So.
So through this program, over 20 cities, North Ogden, Pleasant View, Plain City, all the way down to Bonneville on the other side of the mountain. We work with those students, whether they're in FFA, 4-H, it doesn't matter, to help them with these livestock projects. Because we are on our own this year, we are just asking for some financial support as we figure out how to run this process. So I know on the agenda, it says a discussion or an action item. We would like to request it to be an action item for tonight.
Any questions, council? Councilmember Severin?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Okay, so I've got a couple of pointed questions.
Okay.
Why would you separate from the state fair option?
It wasn't from the state fair, it's from Weber County Fair. It was not by our choice. It was their financial decision. Because so much money is generated through the auction, and then we have to cut out checks for students, like percentages of withholding, all the numbers. I'm not a super number person, so I can't give you a ton of details, but it was their decision because of the financial aspect of it.
So they chose to cut you out.
Yes.
You didn't choose, okay, so.
Yes.
So I got the impression you chose
No.
to make
No.
a change.
No, especially not with less than a year of prep. No, and if you actually look at a lot of counties around us, this is the way that they already are. So we're actually kind of behind the game, but we're scrambling to get it together for this year.
And what does the $1,000 do? Just
So,
collected money.
It's gonna be for the finances that we're figuring out as we go. So right now we are dealing with our shaving is gonna be accessible for students to bed their animals. We're wanting to do live stream for people that aren't able to come to the fair. Our prizes for our showmanship and our market winners. The tablets, they have tablets for like keeping track of the classes and the winners, and like who needs to go where when. Just the accruing costs that normally the county fair took over for us.
Councilmember Swanson?
This 854,000, is that just this last year?
Yes.
Where did that money go?
That is money that came through from the selling of animals and went to the students.
So the students get that money?
All of it except for 3% that the county keeps to pay for the things that we have got to pay for ourselves now.
Which auditor was it that recommended that you be separated? Is that Ricky Hatch?
I
Is it the
could not
county
tell you, but
auditor?
I can get you that answer and email it to you.
That's all I have for the moment, Mayor.
Councilmember Barker?
So is it, I'm gonna guess this is just a one-time ask and then next year you'll have the money from this year's.
Yes.
Okay, that's it.
Any other questions? Looks like the county spent about $25,000 in expenses. Right, so.
Yeah, 3%.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, they've asked for a donation of $1,000. I know it's surely a worthy cause. I guess council, the situation is how do you pick and choose? Who to donate to? Councilmember Swanson?
It's the same question I've asked before, as individuals and groups come asking for money, where are we gonna take it from? I think we need to answer that question before we decide. We need to see where money might be available, and that we can answer, that we can take an action tonight without knowing whether or not, especially given this year's budget, as tight as it's been. I think those are questions that need to be answered before we can commit.
What's your time frame? Yesterday?
Fair's in 2 weeks. So as soon as possible would be preferred.
Councilmember Jopez?
Do you have commitments from other cities yet?
Yes, I don't know the exact cities, but our CTE director said we have 5 that have committed.
Part of my thought process is we've had a few donation requests over the last couple of years, and I'm worried about, how do you pick and choose the proper place to put these funds, and do we have the right place in the budget to go towards it? And so I actually spoke with Mayor Berube about this over the phone the other day, and just expressing a little bit of concern that maybe we as a city should have a pretty concrete policy to how we handle donation requests, and so we don't hurt one organization's feelings versus another. Because I feel like there's going to be a point where we, turn down individuals or organizations, or we've heard of that happening. So just my thoughts.
Councilmember Swanson?
Just one other question. When did the county notify you that they were cutting you off?
December.
Okay, so you've known for 7 months?
Yes and no. It was one of those, like December was the official, and then it's kind of starting from I don't really know how to explain it, but yes, we have.
They've asked for an action. Is there a motion, or do you want to? What would you like to do, council? Councilmember Barker?
Mayor, I'm not the finance guy. But I actually think this is I think this is a worthy cause, and I'll make a motion that we give the Weaver Junior Livestock Association $1,000 they're asking for. And we'll figure out which account. Timing is short, so it's not something we can really wait till our next meeting in 2 weeks.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Barker. Do we have a second? That motion. I'm not seeing a second, so a motion dies for lack of a second. That doesn't mean council won't address it. I'm thinking probably there's a citizen in the community probably make a donation, and so we can't help that way, but okay.
Okay. Who would be the best person to follow up with?
Councilmember Swanson is over finances, so of course, he's leaving town, aren't you?
Not till Friday morning.
Oh, so.
We probably between now and Thursday evening.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. I do believe, especially with Councilmember Jopez, is there should be a policy, not the city, that deals with requests and contributions so that we're consistent in our application. So, John, if you put that on the burner so that we know.
Okay.
Okay. Robert Stant with us tonight?
Oh, he is online. Let me promote him to a panelist.
This is regarding council agreement A 08-2023. Once again, agreement A 08-2023. If the council so desires to approve that. Is he with us, John?
Yes.
Hello.
I'd like to ask the first question. Randy, are you related?
Randy is my father.
Yeah, Randy,
Yeah.
it's your father, right?
I inherited his love for economic development, but not his hair. Fortunately for me, I still have my hair.
So that was my question, if you were. So you want to go ahead?
Yeah, for sure. So let me just share my screen. Oh, I need you to enable me to be able to share that.
Yep, let me. I clicked something wrong, just a sec.
I apologize, I couldn't be there in person. I was in Sandy today and I couldn't make it up there in time, so.
Okay, try now.
Perfect. All right. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about a new, relatively new tool that the state has granted redevelopment agencies to help with funding economic development activities in the city. And so kind of a little background. Well, first a little background on me before I dive into this. So right now I own my own consulting firm, Urban in Maine. Previous to that, I was a vice president at Lewis, Young, Robertson, and Birmingham for over a decade. And then I've also been the economic development division director at Davis County. So I've kind of dipped my toes in the public sector and the private sector. So I have a lot of experience in creating traditional tax increment finance areas. And I've assisted a few cities with analyzing this new tool. So in 2021, the Utah State Legislature approved SB 65, which essentially gives the agency a taxing authority similar to a city, a county, library, or a special district. And really this was for three reasons. So the first one is, and I'll actually mention four, but the first one is the frequency of project area requests. So depending on the county, for a great example is Salt Lake County, or let's actually use Central Utah Waters. They represent numerous counties in Utah, and they were talking about in a given year, they were receiving anywhere from 20 to 25 requests for tax increment participation, which is quite a heavy lift for their staff when you're referring to time and also expertise needed. Redevelopment agency law is really niche, and it's kind of a foreign language if you're not involved in it daily. And so that was one reason for adopting this law. The second reason was to provide a dedicated and stable funding source for local economic development efforts. With each passing year, your traditional redevelopment areas or your traditional TIF areas, it's getting harder and harder to have those approved. So you have a great example is about 10 years ago, when an agency would create a project area, typically you would see taxing entities giving them about 20 or 25 years and up to 75%. Now you have a lot of taxing entities that are either saying, hey, we're not even going to approve this, or they're adopting policies where they will limit it to about 10 years and 50%. So this gives redevelopment agencies or cities kind of a dedicated, ongoing, stable funding source for local economic development initiatives. And then the third one kind of goes hand in hand with that they're getting a little tougher to create, is generally speaking, there's a lack of alignment regarding what your guys's as a city or as an agency's economic development objectives or goals are compared to the county and the school district. So a lot of times with that, these taxing entities will form policies that are aligned with what their organizational goals are, and they may not necessarily line up with what the agency's goals are. So again, as you approach them and ask for their participation, a lot of times that's met negatively. So those were kind of the reasons behind the ultimate adoption of Senate Bill 65. And feel free to stop me with any questions that you might have. So just a few key considerations of the agency taxing authority. So this is an optional feature for a redevelopment agency to create. It's not mandatory. It doesn't technically replace the current system. So I don't know if you're familiar, but in 2016, so before 2016, there were 3 different types of tax increment areas that agencies could create. You could create a URA, an EDA, and a CDA. I believe in North Ogden, you guys have a pre-93 one, and then you have a CDA. In 2016, the legislature said, hey, let's confuse everybody and let's combine it and change the acronym to CRA. So that's what the current tax increment area is called, as a CRA. And cities could still create a CRA if they elect to have their own taxing authority, but only those that are of regional significance. The other one to know is if you do create your agency taxing authority, it's optional for the other taxing entities to participate, and they do so by an interlocal agreement. The current state law says that there's only 3 entities that could participate in this new form of revenue. It would be the city, the county, and the school district. Something that's different compared to your traditional project areas, and this is a pretty big benefit of doing it, is you're actually allowed to spend those funds agency-wide. So you could spend them wherever there was an economic development project or initiative in North Ogden. You guys could spend those funds there. Currently, the way the system works is you first establish a boundary, a map, and you create your project area around that map. And you're only allowed to spend those revenues within that designated area. So if you wanted to create a small business loan program, you could only pick businesses that were within that area. If you wanted to, let's say you had a developer that wanted to build a 300,000 square foot office building and they were across the street from that boundary, you would have to tell them, sorry, we were not able to help you. But with this new mechanism, you could spend it anywhere that's in the agency boundaries. That is something to note before we go on is if you do elect to go this route, it'll be something that you do through your redevelopment agency, not through the city. So anytime we meet or you adopt a plan, you'll be doing that as the redevelopment agency board, not the city council. The only time you'll take action as the city is when we come and negotiate that new interlocal agreement. Again, mentioned this already, it provides greater flexibility in meeting your local economic development needs. And that's just the one that I highlighted is, a lot of municipalities are looking for, hey, how can we benefit our existing businesses? The traditional TIF areas really benefit new development, but there's not necessarily an economic development tool that can be used for existing businesses. And with this new taxing authority, that could be something that you could do with those funds. You, as the local governing board, you retain complete control of the funds. And then this is something that should be noted is unless it's a regional significant project area, you as an agency will no longer be allowed to create the traditional tax increment area or extend any of your existing project areas. And then the last one is this is a tax neutral tool for taxpayers. So this is kind of the process that goes into creating this new agency taxing authority. So the first thing that we would do is we would determine viability. So this would go into studying when your current areas sunset. We would look at how much tax increment is being produced in each of your areas. We would also have initial conversations with the school district and the county to see their interest and to gauge if this is something they would like to participate in or not. I would probably say and we helped Tooele City with this process. And when they reached out to the county and school district, they determined that it's not something they would like to participate in. So if that was the case, we would just suggest that as a city, instead of creating this taxing authority, you could just create a line item for economic development and kind of achieve the same goal. If it is determined that it's viable and the school district and the county would like to participate, then the next thing is we, as an agency, create an implementation plan. And that's kind of that document where it says, hey, these are our goals that we have, and this is how we're going to use the revenue that we generate for agency-wide. And then the next thing you would do is you'd go through the process of establishing the agency as a taxing entity. And this is all outlined in Utah Code 17C, what that formal process is. And then we would formally go and seek participation from the other taxing entities. And again, we would do that through an interlocal agreement. And then the last two ones are, and I have a slide that goes through this so I could bore you with the numbers, but you would convert the new growth into a tax rate based on that negotiation that you did with the interlocal agreements. And you would have a special hearing that's kind of similar to a truth in taxation, where you would convert the new growth to that tax rate. But again, it's not a tax increase. So that's where it varies from that truth in taxation hearing. You're kind of just moving around the taxes. And then the agency tax rate that you produce can only be used according to what's in that implementation plan. And this is just a little graph. This top one shows kind of what the current tax increment financing areas look like. So currently you have a base year value, which stays with the taxing entities. And then the agency negotiates to receive a percentage of the new growth for, in this case, a 20-year period. And then the agencies get the leftover percentage. And then after the 20 years and the traditional project area sunsets, the taxing entities get the entire benefit of the assessed value that happened in the project area. Under this new tool, it's the same thing where this is what the split is, but then instead of at year 20 or whatever year you guys enact, if you elect to enact the tax authority, instead of all of it going to the taxing entities, you negotiate a percentage that will go back to the taxing entities, and then a percentage of the new growth will be converted into a tax rate that the agency could then use ongoing to fund economic development efforts. And so this is just kind of a little snapshot of what that would look like. So this is the Amity Island Redevelopment Agency's Central Business District project area. It's a 25-year project area. They're getting 75%, base year value 10 million, total assessed value 100 million. So what they get the tax increment on is that $90 million. The tax rate in this area is 1%. So this is currently what's being generated in the project area, so 675,000. And then the agency was successful in negotiating to convert 50% of that income into an agency tax rate. So they would get $320,625 ongoing each year. And then it's calculated the same way you would calculate your certified tax rate as a city. So here they look at what the total assessed value is of the town, and then divide what the $320,625 number, and that comes up with what that certified tax rate would be. And then that's kind of just a pretty graph that shows, again, this is the traditional project area, it sunsets, and then it's a split. The new growth taxing entities here, the RDA gets a portion of that new growth, and then the base year continues to flow to the taxing entities. And then this kind of just breaks down, the current structure is here. So tax increment areas. So it's governed by the council and mayor. The stakeholders are all the taxing entities. Revenue is tax increment. The development area is project area specific. The focus is on community-based economic development areas. The term is for a specific amount of that project area life. And then also in these new CRAs, there's a 10% set aside for affordable housing. Under this new structure, the council and mayor are still the governing body. The stakeholders is just the participating municipality. Revenue is property taxes. You can use it citywide. And then it's focused on any sort of community-based economic development goal. And it's an ongoing term. And you can still use it for affordable housing, but that's up to you as an agency board. Any questions? I'm sure there's lots.
Any questions? Right. Let's move down, thanks.
Thank you for your presentation. A lot of information to digest. I'm gonna be honest, that was a lot. But I think I followed some key things. Just to make sure I understand a little bit of what this would be. And if I'm wrong, that's fine. So if I understand that the way that we have our RDA and CDA established after 15, 20 years, whatever it is, that drops off and we have to use the funding that is available to us. It has to be either programmed or used within a reasonable amount of time. With what you're proposing here, I'm just a little bit fuzzy about what happens after that programmed time that the program is over. I know you explained it, but I'm just having a hard time absorbing exactly how we use the funding after the 20 years.
Yep. So what would happen with this one is the year that you elect to have your own tax rate, all of the project areas that you have in North Ogden would essentially expire. And then you would negotiate. So let's say you're collecting $1 million in those two project areas. If you were able to successfully negotiate with the county and the school district and North Ogden City to receive $500,000 a year, then that next year, instead of it being tax increment finance, the redevelopment agency of North Ogden would appear on the property tax rolls of all of the people in your city. And then it would be whatever that tax rate would be, would equate to generating that $500,000. And you would receive that ongoing. It would never expire. So every year you would essentially have that $500,000 to spend on your economic development efforts citywide. Whereas with your current project areas, whenever that project area sunsets and your fund balances are spent, that money's gone. And so the only way to get new money for economic development would be either to allocate a portion of your general fund or to create a new project area.
Okay. And it sounds like part of the benefit of doing something like this is greater flexibility, because your example of a company that wants to come across the street from an existing RDA or CDA, with a RDA or a CDA, it's a pretty strict requirement that it's in that boundary.
Correct.
But there might be a place that's 100 feet out of that boundary that would have been excluded, but you have the flexibility to include them, right?
Correct. Yep. And then again, it's what it is right when a current tax increment area expires, that's all of that tax increment is considered new growth. So when the certified tax rate gets calculated the next year, they include all that value in as new growth. And so what you're doing is you're basically negotiating with the other taxing entities that you get a percentage of that new growth for that year, that it would all go to and that's why it's not a tax increase, because you're not increasing taxes, you're just reallocating how that new growth is distributed.
Thank you.
Any questions, John? Did you want to add anything to this complicated Discussion?
Well, so as Rob mentioned, there hasn't been a city that has successfully implemented one of these. And one of the considerations is because of that rule change in 2016, which happened right after we created our CDA. It's a lot more complicated and problematic. And so the thought was, if you went to this kind of ongoing finance approach, that you'd get some stable revenue to provide some stable economic benefit. The caveat being that obviously it's going to be a limited number, and probably the best way or the only way to convince the school district and the county to jump on board with this idea is to show them number wise how they end up benefiting more in the long term going this route than going the traditional CRA for 20 years, CRA for 20 years, CRA for 20 years. We also have a kind of a unique situation where the CDA that's expiring, there's quite a bit of growth that happened in that area and fairly recently. And so some of those larger projects are not as likely to create new taxable infrastructure. Lee's is a good example. That plaza was redeveloped at the beginning of this 20 years ago, and it's not quite ripe for redevelopment because it's still bustling and surviving quite well. And so there's just some nuances, and so that's why it's kind of this hard, complicated conversation. And in large part, it's more complicated because we don't know what the county and the school district will say. The nice thing about the contract that's proposed is that it's scalable, meaning there's certain benchmarks. So it's not just a flat, hey, here's $13,000. It's based on the level of the work that's completed. And so the idea is, if we go to the county in kind of this initial feasibility phase and they say no, well, then we're able to pause and say, oh, wait, okay, we're not moving forward with this anymore. But we did select this group through an RFP process. Jamie and I looked through those who responded. And anyways, I couldn't tell you for sure, yes, 100%, this is the way to go, but long-term financing wise, it seems to be a more stable source and has a little more flexibility in the money.
John, what you're asking for this evening is an agreement to enter into a contract with Urban and Main Consulting to see if this is feasible.
Yeah, so yes.
Sense. I always like the fact that this doesn't cost the taxpayers money, because it'd be very interesting to see how much money the school district has given up that they're not receiving. And if they had that in their budget, they probably wouldn't be increasing property taxes so dramatically every year. I think I saw this year they're increasing on the average home $147. That's on the average home. So I always like to, the money has to come from somewhere, right? If they're not getting it from these projects, they're getting it another way. The council, would you like to pursue this idea by entering? John, I don't think you indicated what the value of the contract is. What it could be.
So it's, I can pull it up. It's right around that $13,500 range. Let me grab it. I was gonna say, Rob might know it off the top of his head.
I'm pulling it up.
So it's $13,860. Right here, the contract.
Council, would you like, Councilman Severin?
So, John, we're not, if we choose not to do this right now, it's not like we're going to miss out in the future. We could look at this at another time, right?
If the council would like more time to think about it, that's okay. It does sound like Rob might have a little bit of something to add to what I've garbled up in my conversations.
No, so
Here's just my initial thoughts, Mayor and Council. First off, we've got our own challenge with our own tax, with our tax TNT, what do we call that tax? Truth in taxation. So when I think, this is just my thought, but when the citizens here is talking about another tax, we might understand it a little bit different than they do. And I would worry that they may see it a little bit more negative than positive. So for me, my initial thought is that we postpone any kind of an agreement until, I don't even know if I fully understand what we're talking about. So I'm not comfortable making a recommendation for an agreement tonight.
I'm wondering, Councilmember Swanson, I know you're leaving town, but you are our finance liaison. If you could maybe, and I'd be happy to help. This was a lot to digest.
I haven't even stopped chewing yet. Digestion hasn't started.
I'm not saying, this may make sense, but I'd like maybe some time to digest it and see if this does make sense. John, I think you indicated in previous discussions I've had with you that this would extend the time frame on our current RDA, CDA.
Well, the idea would be that the RDA, which is expiring, and we're giving up essentially $600,000 a year of revenue, that this would recapture some of that money in theory. So, you know, the net loss would be less than the 600. So.
But John, that would only be based on if the county and the schools.
They would have to buy into it.
Right.
They have to buy into it.
Right.
Which is probably pretty, not much of a chance, but sorry, Councilman.
Well, they're kind of, I know the sewer district set some limits on this, how long they were willing to go and how deep they were willing to go on the tax give up. Because there's a lot of people asking. And so it'd be interesting. I don't know if there's an assessment of the probability there could be participation from the taxing entities. You know, I hate to enter into a contract thinking that there's not a high probability. I think, didn't you say Twilla tried?
So yeah, unfortunately, to do that, we'd need to engage a consultant to help us understand the probability of that. And that's part of the contract that's kind of like the initial phase of this contract, is to assess whether or not it's.
Yeah, so the overall contract's the 13,860, but of that 8,100 is if it's viable and you go on to do this. So it's what 5,760 would be what that initial part would be. And I think from a time frame too, you're probably looking at 3 to 4 months of doing the study, trying to get onto the county and the school districts radar, set up meetings. So my guess is you're looking at 3 months probably to get to the point if you know if this is going to be viable or not. So it'll be past that truth in taxation period. But I do definitely understand that cautiousness, and you know, and I think that is what would be up to, you know, John and myself and staff would be to come up with an argument, you know, with traditional CRAs, we call it the but-for argument, but for tax increment, this project couldn't happen. So we would do that kind of same thing of arguing why this agency taxing authority makes more sense for the school district and county.
Councilmember Swanson, please.
I'm feeling much the way Councilmember Severing is. I couldn't recommend this right now because I don't understand it well enough. I'd like to propose that I could sit down with John, Mr. Sant, and yourself, Mayor. The four of us could sit down and try to grasp this a little bit better and try to understand it a little bit better before we make a recommendation to council whether we approve the contract or not. I mean, tonight, if I were forced to vote, I would say I would vote against it just because I don't understand it enough to make a recommendation.
I think one thing that'd be interesting is, John, where would we identify this development, where the money would be used? I think that's important. We don't have a lot of commercial ground left.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be interesting to gather some more information. I know time is of the essence, but could we do that? John, would Rob be willing to do that? Give us a little bit more insight.
Yeah, no, I'd be more than happy to.
Let's set something up, and then Councilmember Swanson, if you could come back with a recommendation to the council.
Can we propose, Mayor, that we come back our first council meeting in September? because I'll be gone until mid-August. And that'll give us a couple of weeks that we could meet John with Mr. Sant and get the information that we need, get comfortable to make a recommendation and then do that first meeting in September.
Is that a motion?
Mayor, I'd move then that we would postpone this discussion until the first meeting in September, when I can report back to council.
We have a motion to postpone the decision on this. Is there a second to that?
I second.
A second by council member Ekstrom. Give her a chance to participate. Any discussion, any other questions? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? See none, motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 11, which will be presented by Scott Hess, our Community and Economic Development Director. This is a discussion, I think, to consider deferring the sidewalk widening improvements. 2251, 2284 North Washington Boulevard. I think this is something that's been discussed. Was it back in February last year? So probably time to make a decision on this. So go ahead, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate your time tonight. We have a formal request from the applicants, Rich Mainzard and Tate Sechrist, who have gone through the planning commission on a site plan and subdivision down at the property address the Mayor noted. That was subdivision 2021-14. That's gone through a series of small revisions and tweaks as they've gone through the process. So that was finally approved by Planning Commission just recently, actually on March 17th, 2023, for some small subdivision amendments, and site plan amendments. So that process is done. This was heard by the city council in just a kind of a information item. It wasn't a formal request from the applicants for a deferral, the way that you go through the code and request that. And that was back in February of 2022. And at that time, there were several options that I had written down as notes that we had talked about the council, which included defer to a time-dependent date, have the applicant build the sidewalk, review the code to make sidewalk enhancements only relate to brand new developments, not those that are being retrofit or renovations, or to review the public works standards altogether to determine if the wider sidewalks are necessary along Washington Boulevard. So to refresh your memory of how you get to this point, when you do a subdivision in the code is required to meet all standards of the code to include public works standards. The Washington Boulevard has a streetscape standards in the public works standards that require street trees at a specified interval, certain street lights, and then a 10-foot wide sidewalk on both sides. So the city has used our own funds and built 10-foot wide sidewalks. The project down in front of Walker Cinema and the Animal Hospital to 1700 North, which is on the east side, was a city water line project where we did build the 10-foot sidewalk. There are stretches of 10-foot wide sidewalks in front of Village Prominence Point. We've picked up little individual pieces as we've gone. And we thought that the active transportation plan was going to be moving more quickly than it had. One of the staff members who no longer works for the city was the point of, the PM on that project essentially. So we're moving forward. We're going to have our kickoff mid to late August now for that project, and staff's recommendation after talking, that's planning department staff, and in talking to the engineer, is to allow that active transportation project to really do its work and allow it to ask the public what they want to see on Washington Boulevard and what the needs of all users should be met and how that streetscape should look. And in that time, essentially defer the 10-foot wide sidewalk for those applicants who are coming in and having to meet it for right now. So it's kind of one of those influx planning items. It's possible the public might come back and say, don't want this, or we want it to be a really nice multimodal active transportation route on one side of the street. So we kind of neglect to do the other side. And in the time being, the project isn't without sidewalks. It has a 5-foot wide sidewalk that has been functioning. This is just a betterment in front of their project. So staff's opinion is essentially that the deferral makes sense in this particular case to a dependent time, we would establish that in the actual agreement that we sign. And I think those are administratively signed after the fact by John or the mayor, where we would set it, after the active transportation plan, probably no sooner than probably 1 year from now, but then at the time that the city is ready to put that sidewalk in, the applicants would pay their fair share of sidewalk at that time, unless there's something other, that we change altogether, which would be maybe using some of these CRA funds. Those could be used in an economic development way to build sidewalks and betterments along Washington Boulevard. Or if the city decided to carve off a little bit of capital funds and build the sidewalk themselves. So the piecemeal approach, I think, is going to take forever. I mean, there are some projects along there that are brand new that will never renovate or change for many, many years. So we're looking at how to do this in a little bit more consistent manner. So happy to answer any questions for you. And I will begin.
See if we have any questions from the council. Councilmember Swanson.
If the applicant were required to build this now, how much would the city be participating in the cost of that?
Zero.
So in the future, what you referenced was the city may be having to pay for some of that.
If the city came back in, say we had a water line project on the west side, or we had a sidewalk project on the west side, we might elect to put in the 5 feet that's there already. We may put in that portion, and so it would be the +1 cost of the addition, since they're one that has the.
Like we did with Waterstone.
And there are other projects that have been approved that will be held to the 10-foot standard. So Cooperstown is one that by development agreement will put the 10-foot wide sidewalk in. Village of Prominence Point will put the 10-foot wide sidewalk in as they do their commercial pieces along Washington Boulevard. We've got another project on the docket tonight. It's a brand new project that would, south of 1700 South, that would put in a 10-foot wide sidewalk. So there's a few that are related to brand new projects that the city would just require it to be done. I think those renovation projects are it's right on the cusp of the amount of investment that may warrant this type of use, but it's really the subdivision requirements that made them meet the sidewalk standard.
So you mentioned earlier that we need to do the active transportation piece. And it may be that the residents come back and say, we don't want 10 foot. So why are we requiring, if that's a possibility, why are we requiring Cooperstown and the others to do something that we're saying we may defer now to some, because residents may say we don't want it?
Sure. So in
Why not
land use
defer them
law,
all?
well, in land use law, you get the letter of the law the day you apply. So for those projects that are done and penciled and completed, that's a standard that they have to meet.
Right.
So you could, as the legislative body, do a temporary land use ordinance. I don't use the word moratorium, but you could do a temporary land use ordinance that says, for this time being, this time frame for the next 8 to 12 months, or however long it's going to take us, hopefully less than that, to do the active transportation plan. No widenings of sidewalks will be required, or but kind of put applicants on alert that, but you may have to after the fact, should we retain this. I think that for the city and just personally from the planning department, it makes a lot of sense to have the wider sidewalks on Washington Boulevard. They function as really multimodal transportation corridors, so kids on bikes, scooters, ADA accessibility, all manner of mobility, getting bikes up out of the street off of Washington Boulevard and above on the sidewalks when it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense because the speeds on that corridor make it really uncomfortable to ride unless you're a very confident cyclist.
Thanks, Scott.
Any other questions from Mr. Hess? Let's move down past.
I'm trying to envision, I think the deferral kind of makes sense just from what I studied in the report leading up to this, but I'm trying to think the dental office that's to the south of them. They've got this big berm going up there. How in the world would they ever do a 10-foot sidewalk? I'm just trying to visualize because I can't even imagine.
Right. Yeah, you probably end up with some retaining walls. I think the same question was sort of answered on Washington Boulevard as it went up the hill from 2600 going north, and we widened the project out. All of those front yards ended up with retaining walls in order to just accommodate the standard 5-foot wide sidewalk. But therein, that's part of this whole question is the feasibility and practicality of doing this on both sides of the roadway versus one, or prioritizing one and then improving crossings across Washington Boulevard. So there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah, okay. I would just say that in this situation, I would be in favor of the deferral, considering it's not a brand new project. But for the brand new projects, such as where Walker was, well, that's different, but where Cooperstown is and Village of Prominence Point eventually, the Severing property that we're gonna be talking about in a minute, it just makes sense as a brand new to require that. We've had that requirement for a few years now. But I'm comfortable with the deferral in this situation.
So Councilmember Delpaz, if I could just clarify in my mind, because I get really nervous about the selective enforcement of ordinances. What is the difference between, because we're going to ask these other guys that are making developments, we're going to ask them to put in a 10-foot sidewalk. Concrete's very expensive. So help me understand why a new developer has to do it. Because if we're not going to have 10-foot sidewalks, we probably shouldn't make it put in 10-foot sidewalks. So in your mind, what makes the difference between an existing who's modifying? I'm not saying we shouldn't differ. I'm just trying to get my hands around this. It's because I don't want to be selective enforcing these ordinances.
For me, it's just related to, they're going to be this, and other properties are this way right now. But even more so than other areas of North Ogden, they are going to be a greater island of this 10-foot sidewalk. And so the Cooperstown, Village of Prominence Point, the Severing property, there's a lot of 10-foot sidewalk that's going to be there. And so from that perspective, it makes sense. And we're not losing anything in the sense that they have committed. They will pay for it. They will do it within a reasonable amount of time, it sounds like. So that's just where I'm coming from. And it just doesn't seem like they're an existing business that didn't just cut ground, is kind of, that's how my mind's working.
Councilmember Barker.
In my opinion, the reason I'm in agreement, I'm okay deferring this, because right now, these two business owners don't have to do anything. They do nothing, and we're not enforcing this 10-foot wide sidewalk. If I understand correctly, you want to combine your parking lots and extend the dental office in the rear. They're not touching the front of their property at all. And the reason I want to combine parking lots is there's an island in the middle of Washington that prohibits them from turning left. So we're not touching the front of their property at all. So why tear up all the front of their property because we want to combine a parking lot?
I don't have a problem with deferring. I just want to make it clear why we're deferring, because if I'm someone else that's building new and I want to understand that, because you're going to impose upon me a 10-foot sidewalk that may or may not, according to Scott, be required. So like I say, I'm not that it matters what I think, but I'm not adverse to the deferral. I just want to make sure that we're very clear what the conditions are when we're going to defer something, because this won't be the first nor the last. And I like to have clear outlines of why you can qualify for a deferral. Councilmember Swanson.
North Ogden is an island of sidewalks and no sidewalks in some places here, and they've all been done by deferral. They've all promised that they're going to do them, and this is not on you guys at all, right? It's the history of North Ogden. We would have thousands and thousands of feet of sidewalk that we don't have now if all the deferrals that we've been given and promised were actually followed through in time. It seems like the North Ogden has a history of the deferrals on sidewalks turning into a bridge to nowhere. Nothing ever ends up getting done, and now we're behind the 8 ball in many areas of our city when it comes to sidewalks. We've had this discussion about sidewalks and deferrals in the past as a council, and we specifically as a council decided that we were not going to give deferrals because of the number of deferrals and the frequency with which the deferrals don't get followed through with. I don't have a problem with the deferral if we're going to, because it might not be a policy that is determined that the residents want to follow through with, as you mentioned a moment ago, Mayor. If we're going to defer this one, then I think we should be deferring them all. It's inequitable to require one builder on Washington to build a 10-foot sidewalk that may not be required in the future. And when we're at the exact moment deferring a 10-foot sidewalk for somebody else. If the folks at Cooperstown want to make the commitment that they'll make it a 10-foot sidewalk, if we decide down the road in 12 to 18 months that that is what we're going to do, and then we go back to everybody and we say, okay, everybody puts in the 10-foot sidewalk, then I think I would feel more comfortable with that. It would be less selective, Mayor, as you mentioned. If we're unwilling to do that and we're going to enforce it on a 3 out of 4 projects, then I think the 4th project ought to have it as well. That's just what I'm feeling at the moment.
Councilmember Delpech, do you have some comments?
Yeah, I feel like if I understand some of the deferrals that we've done in the past, I don't know that we've done a good job at tying the deferral to an escrow agreement. So I feel like we're pretty sound and safe that if we provide a deferral in this situation, the money is going to be in an account and it will happen at the time that we as a city staff and council, I guess, possibly deem necessary. So I know that we've done deferrals and we have all these islands of areas in North Ogden that have potentially suffered from it. But I don't see that happening here because we will actually have, I guess you could say, legal teeth to require it to be done a year, 2 years down the road, whenever that is necessary.
From a principal standpoint, would you be willing to do that then with the other developments going on along Washington and not require the 10-foot sidewalk? Let them put in a 5-foot sidewalk and escrow the money to put in the remaining 5 feet, depending on what we decide down the road.
I mean, I don't know if we would need to take a poll of the council here to know how we feel, but I already feel like the 10-foot sidewalk determination has been pretty well determined because of the businesses that have already done that in the past. So the water line project that triggered that 10-foot,
Sure.
The village at Prominence Point, all these different places that have already started down that road. I feel like we set a precedence that there will be 10-foot sidewalks. I can't imagine that a study will come back to say that's not a good thing, because I've been along there and it looks really good and I think it's a lot safer. People can travel more freely. So I don't have a problem with that. My mind is just saying brand new project that doesn't have good existing infrastructure. I mean, my example would be the Severing property. The sidewalk that's in front of theirs, I'm sure it's ancient. I bet that cement is 50 years old if I had to guess. I'm just spitballing, but it's old. So it makes sense to me that this brand new development that they're putting in, it would have to be put in. So that's just kind of the way that I'm thinking of it.
John, what's the closest 10-foot sidewalk to this piece?
Um,
The car wash.
Yeah. Yeah, the car wash on Prominence Point.
That's quite a ways, isn't it? All right, you have additional comments?
You know what I do, Mayor? Thank you. I think we need to revisit the ordinance on the sidewalks anyway. But I find myself agreeing with Councilor Barker. If this is something that's being done behind their property, which it is, I don't think we should touch the front of it.
So are you proposing, Councilmember Severin, an amendment to the ordinance that says it doesn't trigger putting in a 10-foot sidewalk if it's not touching the front of the property? Because at this point in time, the ordinance doesn't state that.
Yes, that's what I would, that's what I'm thinking.
So are you proposing to bring that amendment to talk to Scott and have that ordinance amended? Because tonight, I don't think we can amend that ordinance, John, without having it in front of us. Like I say, I'm not adverse if we have a consistent application of why we're not doing it. But well, it seems a little bit selective enforcement what we're talking about, but if the council wants to modify the ordinance to say it only triggers the improvement if there's construction in the front of the system, that's surely an avenue you could take.
Well, Mayor, I would,
Oh, go ahead, Council.
well, I was just gonna say, I just don't think it's equitable. I don't think it's right that when they're doing something in the back of their property that they get whacked with having to put in a 10-foot sidewalk in the front. So for me, I would propose the idea that we revisit that particular ordinance.
Well, what we have before us tonight is a request to consider deferring the sidewalk. I think that is on the agenda this evening. For the frontage of 2251 North and 2284 North Washington Boulevard. So do we have a motion to make that deferral?
Mayor,
Councilmember Dalpas?
I motion that we grant a deferral to those sidewalk widening on 2251 North and 2284 North Washington Boulevard as part of the Loman View subdivision lot 1. With a note that the deferral is tied to money being held separately in an escrow. So we need to make very certain that that money is there in an escrow and that we can come back to them at a reasonable time to require that.
Reasonable time being,
Well, after the.
in conjunction with?
Okay, in conjunction with the active transportation plan that is underway, almost underway.
We have a motion. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
And a second by Councilmember Barker. Is there any further discussion? Councilmember Swanson?
Mayor, I would offer an amendment to the motion to include other developments, new and or otherwise, along Washington Boulevard, where a 10-foot sidewalk is being required, that we defer the 10-foot width until such time that the active transportation plan has been vetted and decided upon. I think we've heard that things are inequitable. I think it's inequitable to require developers to build something that we may not be requiring in the very near future and are going to be active. We know we're going to be actively discussing whether or not we're even going to carry it out.
John, help me here. So we have a motion and a second. We have a motion to amend the motion. Help me here. I'm confused.
So you would, there's two types of amendments, a friendly and let's call it hostile. The friendly amendment would be the two original motioner and seconder agreeing to the amendment. Or if they don't, then you would vote. You would need a second for the amendment. I know, sorry. Let's start with if the motioner and the seconder would agree with the amendment. If
I'm
that's
offering it as a friendly amendment.
Yeah.
Are you being friendly tonight?
In a hostile way. Okay.
Well, Mayor, can I ask, can I also?
We are in discussion phase. We are in discussion phase.
Right, so I still think that we add something to this that triggers the need for the 10-foot sidewalk if something's being done on the east side of west side businesses.
So yours is an amendment to Councilman Swanson's amendment.
And to Councilman Delpas's amendment. Wow. So we're doing 3 amendments to one
Lost
amendment.
one.
I'll just start by saying that I don't agree to Councilman Swanson's proposed amendment.
Agreed.
Okay. So
If that helps you guide us.
yeah, so then in that case, the Councilman Swanson's amended motion would need a second. And if there was a second, then the council would vote on whether or not the motion would include the amendment. up or down, yes or no?
Just next step. Is there a second to Councilmember Swanson's motion to amend this?
I actually have something to say. I've had my hand up for a while, but
Oh, I'm sorry. We've got John watching that. So Councilmember Ekstrom, we are in the discussion phase, so proceed.
all right. I mean, for me, I watch along where we've got those 10-foot sidewalks and I rarely see anybody on them. So I really don't see the need for 10-foot sidewalks unless we really increase the number of pedestrians we've got going along there. And so I would be in favor of revisiting that 10-foot sidewalk requirement, number one. And number two, especially in the areas of the city, like the one that's under discussion right now, where it's completely developed, right? There's no more people coming there, and I don't think there's any more traffic going to be on it. So I would second Councilmember Swanson's motion to defer all of them until we really revisit that 10-foot sidewalk requirement. So that's where I stand.
Okay, John, so we have the second. Now where are we?
So you would now vote on whether the amendment is included in the original motion. So you're not voting on the actual motion, you're voting on the amendment being included.
Okay, so we're voting right now. Oh, Councilmember Severn?
Yeah, but does this mean we can still go back and revisit the idea of whether it is triggered by some action on behalf of the owners of the property, whether it's in the front or the back?
I think we need to go back and look at the entire ordinance.
Yeah, I think that's what
would
we're
be
talking
a
about
whole
here.
separate-
We even need 10-foot sidewalks.
Well, here's the one concern I have, though, Mayor, is we've got Tate and Rich that have been sitting here, and they've been on hold now for how long now?
Since February of 2022.
Now, to me, I just think that's way too extreme. That's beyond what we've just caused them more.
But
I
no,
think the
no,
motion here is to
no,
defer
well,
all.
just note that they put a little bit of pause in the project for a moment as well. So it's not like they've been sitting around the whole time, but just want to clarify that.
You figure February 2022.
Well, I'm just saying, and correct me, well, I know it's not open to open discussion right now, but I believe there was a small pause within themselves that they decided to come back later on.
But part of it was because the city was ridiculous in their request.
I can't confirm that.
Yeah. So anyway,
I don't know that it's a ridiculous request that the ordinance as it's written be enforced. I mean,
Revisiting
the
this.
ridiculousness of it should have been discussed at the time that you and all the rest of us passed the ordinance.
Well, but now we're revisiting the ordinance of whether we need the 10-foot.
we're not, though.
We're not.
But
We're
that's
not.
what
We're
talking
only
about in the
visiting
future.
whether or not it gets enforced. That's what we're visiting right now.
Well, but Councilman Charlotte just said whether we want to even enforce a 10-foot sidewalk.
She said we need to discuss that.
Right, that's
And
what I
then
mean.
she seconded my amendment. So at some point, I think we do need to have that discussion about the ordinance.
And that's just simply my point, is whether the ordinance for a 10-foot was really a necessity in the first place.
Okay.
But that actually was my point, is I don't think we need a 10-foot, so I would like to revisit the ordinance. Sorry, I'm just talking out of
Okay,
order.
well, we do have a motion on here which would require revisiting the ordinance, because I think Councilmember Swanson is saying he wants to
Defer it all
defer it
until,
all till we have a chance to look at the ordinance to see if 10 feet is what we want.
that's the estimate.
So everything would be deferred until that point in time. Now, I don't know what that does to their project, waiting to see if they got a. And I think the other thing
Well, I
is,
think
you
they'd
have
be
to
able
look
to
at
move
it to see if
forward.
it affects the front, so you can look at that in the ordinance.
Yeah.
So we do have an amendment. We have a second to that. Do you want to amend your amendment, or are you covered on that?
No, I think as it stands, it would defer all 10-foot sidewalks. They'd be Cooperstown, everybody would do the basic 5-foot sidewalk. And then depending on what is decided in the future, revisiting the ordinance with the, I was thinking rapid transit, but active transit. once that's all ironed out, if we decide, yeah, we're gonna keep the 10 foot, then everybody gets to put the 10 foot in.
So the developer could decide whether they want to go 5 or 10 now, because
That's correct.
tearing up a 5 and going to a 10 would be expensive, so they could make that decision if they wanted to put in 10, knowing that that could happen.
Correct.
Okay. Councilmember Barker, did you have something before I?
Just a curious question. When you go from a 5 foot to a 10, do you tear out the 5 and make it a 10?
You don't
You
have.
put
you-
two 5s right
you
next
could-
to each other.
Yeah, you don't have to. So you can,
Okay.
you could put the two
All right.
guys next to each other. It just becomes,
That'd
there's
be
utilities, there are all sorts of things that.
I will point out, and I think these guys would agree, their section of sidewalk it'd be difficult to do that. They explained to me that it'd be difficult for them to do that with how their sidewalk is situated right now. It might be one small bump in the sidewalk that would make that not feasible.
But they call
For future development.
Okay.
And looking at the ordinance, it could be that if they're not affecting the front of their property, it doesn't trigger the 10 foot. That was the other thing that could be examined here. Okay. We have a motion to amend the motion. We have a second. I'm gonna do a roll call vote here just to keep my mind clear. Let's start with Councilmember Ekstrom and we'll work our way down this way tonight. I'm sorry for not announcing that previously. Councilmember Ekstrom, are you in favor of Councilmember Swanson's motion?
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson, are you in favor of your motion?
Yes.
Councilmember Barker,
Yes.
Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpaz.
No.
Okay, the motion passes on a 4-1 vote. Now what, John?
So
Again.
the amendment is now included in the original motion.
So now we vote on the motion.
Yep, now you vote on Councilman Dalpaz's motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Dalpaz, amended by Councilmember Swanson and voted the council on 4-1. So now we'll start again with you, Councilmember Ekstrom.
Can you remind me exactly what Councilmember Dalpaz's motion
Yes, I
was?
will kind of reiterate what my motion was. So my motion is to allow a deferral of the 10 foot sidewalk for Mr. Wingsgard and Mr. Seacrest to be able to defer that until we have more information from the active transportation plan that will be coming through within the next year or so. And that's at approximately 2251 North Washington Boulevard as part of the Loman View subdivision, lot 1, with the note that money has to be set aside in an escrow to be able to do that later.
Okay, so there's a lot in that motion. So,
Councilmember Swanson has amended that to say defer all 10-foot sidewalks until the active transportation plan
Yes.
is done, with the option of the builders deciding whether they want to put in 10 or 5 or escrow.
okay, so the escrow is a part of the new one as well.
I
That
think
was the part that I was unclear about. Okay,
Consistency according to our city attorney who's shaking his head.
That's correct.
Which it means that's correct. Okay. With that, Councilmember Ekstrom, would you like to cast your vote on deferring all 10-foot sidewalks based upon Councilmember Dalpaz's motion?
I think I've got my head around it. Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Severing,
Yes.
Councilmember Dalpaz.
Yes.
Okay, you got that, Scott?
Someone's taking notes, right?
And then what we will do is we will look at the ordinance as requested to see if that needs to be amended. So John, if you would bring that back with possible amendments based upon Councilmember Severing's request to look and see if that should be triggered by frontage versus non-frontage. So it sounds like you guys can proceed along if your sidewalk's been deferred. Sort of, kind of.
That was easy.
Government.
So, yeah, proceed with your project, with the deferral. Okay. All right.
Mayor, can I make a comment? Sure. I apologize. I hope that I should not have used the word ridiculous. I just thought it was excessive. So I apologize for
And
that.
surely look at that. See if there needs to be amendments to that ordinance. Scott, did you have a question?
The applicant was wondering if they could address their project.
Council, would you like to?
To what?
They want to address the council regarding their project? You okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Usually ask for the applicants. Anybody want to take a minute?
Yeah, thank you so much. The only thing that I would just address with that is the difference between new development and existing development would be the concrete is actually the most minimal expense to this whole thing. It's the utilities that would have to be moved in order to have a 10-foot wide sidewalk. We figure that we're gonna have, water lines, we've got phone lines, power, all those boxes that line the sidewalk right there in front of our properties. And we had put together some numbers and it was excessive. I mean, the concrete is a minimal expense in comparison to what the other items would have to be moved. So that's the difference between new development and existing. And that has to be on all of us as owners of that land, which isn't even our land, it's owned by UDOT. So it's quite frustrating. So that's it, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 12 now, which is a discussion or action to consider development agreement for property at approximately 1650. Oh, did you want to make a comment?
No, I'm good.
Sorry, I didn't want to, if you wanted to. Discussion or action to consider development agreement for property at approximately 1651 North Washington Boulevard. Mr. Hess, you're back on.
Just all the easy ones.
Good luck.
Okay. So thank you, Mayor and Council. We have coming back for a project that we discussed before, development agreement for property at approximately 1651 North Washington Boulevard. This is, that's the address of the existing home that I believe is there. This is in relation to the annexation request that came in for partial manufacturing and partial residential R4 on the rear half. So, and the manufacturing use be tied directly to Class A storage facility with that requirement that there be a really nice building built, block wall and other items that were addressed as part of the annexation request that was permitted and approved. So the developer, Mr. Severin, has gone back, reviewed their site plan, have enough information on the site plan to help us determine approximate size of each portion of the project, kind of a road layout and configuration. There's some changes. The primary access will ultimately connect to the cell and then address the building itself. So their folks, the developers have looked at it. John and I have looked at it. We've gone back and forth a handful of times, and we think that we have an agreement that everybody can, that we can live with the staff. We're interested in council's comments tonight. And really what we're writing out in here, the specific uses that would be permitted to be done inside that annexed area, and then have some exhibits in there and discuss the building, the materials, block wall, sizes of the property, that sort of thing. That's what's addressed in the development agreement. Just a quick note, because this has come up before in other development agreements, is there's no timing trigger in here. I don't think that the, well, I don't know, I guess this is a question for the applicant or question for the council, is that, in the past, when you have commercial projects that are also have a residential component is typically much easier to finance. So you can get that to come up out of the ground, and you may have, you have finance challenges with commercial, but this is a user who's bringing forward a use to be done that is sort of the, primary use on the property, with the R4 being kind of a buffer use in the back. So there may be less risk of the commercial sitting vacant like we have on a handful of those projects, but it's just something that is always worth discussing.
This isn't allowed in our current manufacturing zone, right? Wouldn't we have to?
amend the manufacturing zone before we could enter into a development agreement?
So yeah, so there are other steps that'll have to be done.
Didn't we do that?
No, we haven't.
I thought
We
did
haven't
that.
done the actual amendment of the zone itself, so that's its own.
You know,
Hard.
my personal opinion too is sometimes it's easier to do the harder thing first. And we've had a lot of instances where, because we rezone this, basically, we're looking at rezoning this from commercial. And if we don't require some time frame for the commercial aspect of this, I think what we found before is that it doesn't happen. And, you know, without commercial in the city, the residents end up paying through increased property tax. So once again, it's no secret, I don't have a vote, but my feeling is, yeah, there needs to be a time frame on when the commercial will be. We did that with, what is it, Cooperstown.
Cooperstown.
And once again, I'm all for some form of consistency, so we're not picking and choosing. So this might take, but I don't know how we could do this development agreement without rezoning manufacturing.
So John, was it rezoned? Can we go back to what the annexation, because in the development agreement, it says R4 and C1. And now I don't remember if we gave them M1 and R4 or C1, with C1, the commercial be having a provision for Class A storage in this specific area. So what the amendment would be to our commercial area of our code for like a location dependent area that you could do storage units.
Which currently we don't have any provision for storage units in the city, right?
We don't, we have all of the provisions that we would carry over, but therefore upgrades to existing storage units.
Yeah, so I'm just confused here. And how we could enter into this development agreement without having a zone to put it in. I mean, seems like the cart's before the horse here.
Well, the approval of the annexation came with the requirement that there be a development agreement. So it's kind of like, I don't think there was a clear path to chart here. You know.
Clear path seems to be, you better have a zone to put it in.
I know we had a discussion about putting it in C1 because it was an allowed use in manufacturing, but we had virtually no manufacturing zones.
It's not.
But it hasn't gone through it hasn't actually gone through planning commission with a recommendation to city council. So
I thought we didn't have any provision in any of our zones that allowed for.
Not for new.
I think we've approved, we want to move forward with this, but I want to take the right steps to do it. I don't think I've heard any pushback on doing the project, but it seems like we should have a proper process.
And if we were to, well, I agree. If we were to approve the development agreement, it still does say in the development agreement that you have to follow all of the codes. So I don't think that it puts you at risk of circumventing it, because it still says you can do these things per this development agreement and North Ogden City codes. It's just a.
But could we put in this as contingent upon the
amendment of the
amendment, because there's nothing that allows for these in the city. I mean, John?
So I was just
John,
going,
attorney hat.
I was just going back and reading the minutes from that meeting. And it did say that one of the final comments after the, or before the vote, it said, Councilmember Ekstrom asked if it's necessary to stipulate they'll be allowed in the zone and if it'll be handled in a future meeting or as part of the development agreement. And Councilmember Swanson said it would be done later in the form of a zone text amendment. And so that hasn't happened yet. Meaning that the zone text amendment does still need to happen.
Well, can we get that done in the next meeting, John? I mean,
We-
I'm sure he's anxious to move forward.
So it still has to go through the planning commission. All land use text amendments have to go through the planning commission. But there's no reason why the council couldn't make a commitment that with the zone that's being assigned, and if that zone then includes the storage units, it can happen.
That's what I mentioned, this probably should be amended to say it's contingent upon getting the usage of storage units approved in the city and whatever zone we're gonna put it in. I don't think there was anything else in the agreement. Was there, council you disagreed with? No. Everything else was in line?
The only other question I had was on parking. I just wanted to make sure the 3 stalls per residential, is that what we've done for other residential developments? I thought it was usually 2.
Yeah, they've all been.
So we typically have required, we did 2 for Village of Prominence Point,
Right,
but every other development has 3.
okay,
I will tell you, Village of Providence Point, if you go down there.
should have had 3.
Not to look back. but I'm just
Looking
saying
back,
it's-
no, I
it
am
is-
looking back. yeah.
Boy, in fact, the HOA just set out a thing saying, hey, all this illegal parking, fix it or we're gonna tow you. Okay, John, so, can we add that to this development agreement and get the council to vote on that with the contingency improved, or do we need to bring it back?
We can add it. I'm just looking at the right section to put it in. Let's see. I mean, it kind of is there under section 8. Let me zoom down there for you. That says development standards. And it basically says that the code takes precedence over this agreement. And so the code would need to be amended. But we can make that more clear if the council would like to.
Sure. Vikings Council, want to clarify that, or you just want to go with the language that's there? Councilmember Swanson.
John, can a motion be made to accept the development agreement contingent upon the text amendment for the C1 commercial zone being passed through planning commission and city council?
Yes.
I think that would be the easiest. So Mayor, I'll make a motion. Let's try to streamline this a little bit. That we accept the development agreement for the property at approximately 1651 North Washington Boulevard, contingent upon the text amendment being passed through planning commission and city council, adding the use of storage units in the C1 zone.
Okay.
Does that
So
make
we have a
sense? Is that clear?
motion. Second. Is that okay, John?
Yes.
Okay, and we have a second by, is that you, Councilmember Barker?
Yep.
Is there an agreement number I should have used?
Yes, it's agreement A 09
Let's-
2023.
Let's use 8 because we skipped it.
Because we deferred the other postponed. Agreement A 08 2023.
So I'll amend my motion to include agreement A 08 2023.
Second. Second amendment. I'm not gonna go through the amendment of the amendment to vote on the amendment. We'll just go ahead with this. All right, is there any further discussion? Councilmember Severing has recused himself from the vote on this. Councilmember Ekstrom? you
Yes,
agree with the motion?
I agree with the motion, yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Swanson?
Yes.
Councilmember Barker?
Yes.
Councilmember Dowpass?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously with abstention by Councilmember Severing. Okay. Some progress. All right, we're now going to go to Councilmember Barker. Who's going to act as our fire marshal on this presentation. This is ordinance. In case someone would like to make a message, a motion. The ordinance is 2023-14. Barker?
Okay, if we haven't been confused already, now we get to talk fire code. Actually, there's not much we have to do here tonight. The state legislature already adopted the 2021 International Fire Code. For some reason, they're 2 years behind, but that's beside the point. What we need tonight is, in the back of the book, there's the appendices A through N, and I need to really do my job. I need the council to adopt appendix A, B, C, and D. A is the appeals, the Board of Appeals, B is fire flow requirements, C, fire hydrants, and D is fire apparatus access roads.
Council, do you have any questions for Mr. Barker?
I wrote all that red language myself.
All right, well, everyone have a chance to look at this fire code amendment? All right, that being the case, this is ordinance 2023-14. I would be looking for a motion to adopt the fire code as outlined in the packet and as explained by Councilmember Barker.
Mayor, I move that we adopt ordinance 2023-14, adopting the fire code as outlined by Councilmember and Fire Marshal Ryan Barker.
Thank you, Councilmember Ekstrom. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Dawes. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. We'll start again with you, Councilmember Ekstrom,
Yes.
Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Severin,
Yes.
Councilmember Dawes.
Yes.
I know.
All right, thank you very much. We're now going to hear from our city manager and attorney, Mr. John Call, who's going to talk to us about the TechServe agreement that he's proposing. This is the agreement A09 2023. Is that right, Joyce?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So council, this is the same contractor we've been using. Our contract expired technically on July 1st, and we extended it for a month because to extend for a full year requires council approval because of the amount. It's over a $25,000 a year expense. It's about 36. The big changes are that it has gone from $145 an hour in the hours over what we contract for to $155. So it's gone up by $10. And it's just another 11 months on top of what it is. We are right close to the end of the extension of our RFPs allow. And so next year we will need to go out to bid. TechServe has been our contractor for at least 10 years, 10 plus years, and have served us well. A good example of that is our liability insurance associated with technology and cyber threats did not increase this year. So they have implemented several security items that have benefited us. But the total contract cost is it's this $3,022.50 a month. So times that by 11, and you get $242 or something like that. So that's the contract for the 11 months. And then I would expect to see some RFPs going out in December with a contract for next year through qualified firms, which we would hope and anticipate TechServe would resubmit, not because they're guaranteed it, but just because we don't have any issues with the service they provided us to this point.
Any questions, further questions, Mr. Call? Yes, Councilmember Swanson.
John, you mentioned that any work over was going from 145 to 155 an hour?
Correct.
What's the 175 an hour in the next paragraph after the 3,022.50?
Oh, sorry, I said it wrong.
175.
It went from 155 to 175.
Okay, so the 175 is the correct hour?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Tech services are getting expensive. They're in demand, as we all know.
Yeah, lots of cyber threats out there.
Any further questions for Mr. Call? And I would be looking for a motion to approve agreement A09-2023, which is to approve an agreement with tech services for computer services, as outlined by Mr. Call. have a motion?
Mayor, I move that we accept agreement A09-2023 with TechServe for computer services for the city.
Thank you, Councilmember Severin. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Ekstrom. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, Councilmember Ekstrom, we're gonna do a roll call vote here to express your vote.
Yes, indeed.
Councilmember Swanson,
Yes.
Councilmember Barker.
Yes.
Councilmember Severin.
Yes.
And Councilmember Dowpats.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We'll now have council department reports. Councilmember Severin, do you have anything to report regarding the police department?
Yes, Chief Quinn wanted me to invite the city to the annual National Night Out Against Crime on Tuesday, August 1st at 6 p.m. in North Ogden Park. So bring your children and grandchildren and let's fight crime.
That's it? That's the building project.
That's all. Pardon me?
That's the building project. Moving along.
He didn't give me any information. It appears as though it's moving along just fine.
Slow but sure.
The snow and other issues delayed us by about 3 months. So our current substantial completion date is January.
John, how's that 1.9% bond looking?
It's really good money. It's very, very cheap money. It is definitely cheaper than the inflation of labor and materials.
And earning 5% of the money.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Ekstrom, do you have anything you'd like to report on Public Works this evening?
Sure thing. Yes, our Public Works Department are very hardworking. They are busy with the tank project, the big new water tank that we are getting. The old tank is being hauled out and they're ready to start building the new one. We also have the sanitary survey scheduled for our water system. So they'll come and audit it and make sure that our water is functioning within acceptable parameters. And that's pretty much it for Public Works.
Okay, if I could just add there, I know I talked with Dave a little bit earlier. We had numerous water line breaks. Went from the tank to flowing water from Ogden City, basically, because the tank used to relieve the pressure. We found out that that wasn't the case, and so we had major water line breaks along 1700. And so if citizens see those little things from the fire hydrants, Ogden City helped us put in some things to relieve pressure from the water lines, and they have attached to the fire hydrants. Which John reminds me when I talk about 1700 North. We made some commitments on those undersized culverts. You could bring an update on that to the next meeting so that we can keep our commitment there. That'd be good.
Sounds great.
Anything else?
That's it for me.
Okay, Councilmember Barker, do you have a report for us on
Yes.
Parks and Recreation?
North Ogden Park is recovering well after the Cherry Days events there. Most of the water's out of both Wadman and Portland Parks, and they've begun their rehabilitation. They're starting to fill the pond at Bicentennial Park after the volunteer group cleaned it up, so thanks. Yeah, you guys did great. And then the playground equipment at Wadman is mostly up. They're trying to get an update from the contractor, but they still don't have a completion date yet.
Then we'll be getting a report, I think, next council meeting from the committee. Chair Days will be, I think. John, what is the status on the survey?
So the survey should go out this week. I haven't checked with the Cherry Days committee yet, but we have had a request because not all the council will be here next meeting to delay it by 2 weeks. But I haven't checked with them to make sure that they'll all be available as well to attend on the 22nd of August.
I think the missing council member could review that online.
That's entirely possible.
I think it's,
I've got my list of questions, though.
You can email them to me. The 22nd is Northview Fire Truth and Taxation at 6 o'clock.
Yeah, I'm just thinking particularly on the survey part, the citizens are anxious to get it reported. Would that be okay with you, Councilmember Swanson?
You betcha. I'll check what the time zones are and maybe from a very early morning beside a fjord, I'll call in with my toes dipped in the water.
You're always welcome to call in. Okay, with that, we'll go to item number 16, which is any further public comments based upon discussion this evening. Okay, Doug.
Doug Anderson, North Ogden. Just satisfy my curiosity, where in the city are 10-foot sidewalks already in place so that I can go and see what it is that we're talking about? Where can I go see a typical 10-foot wide sidewalk, please?
Right in front of Walker Center.
Walker Center.
And
That would
white
be on
right in
the
front of-
East side of the road.
And also right in front of the new car wash on Washington.
It's on the west side of the road.
It's on the west side of the road by Big O Tire.
Okay, Walker Cinema. Car wash. And the car wash.
North Ogden. I just had to say that I loved the active and thorough discussion you guys had on sidewalks. Little disagreement, but you ironed out things and you came to a conclusion, and the conclusion included all the wisdom that you brought forth. It was great.
First time anybody's supposed to have wisdom.
Chris Pulver, North Ogden. I guess it just, from what we were talking about the tech serve, I assume, because I know there's some training to kind of reduce the use of them. I know we were talking about that during the budget review, and I assume that this is going to increase to the budget for tech serve as well. So that's just something to think about as well, because obviously if you have the same number of hours and you just jump $20 an hour anyway. And then I guess on the storage unit, I didn't hear, and everybody agreed to, no businesses on the first floor of the storage unit. So that's kind of disappointing to hear. And then also, it sounded like you guys just approved storage units throughout any C1, which is not something that has been done before. So I just was kind of worried about that.
I don't think we have approved that. It has to go to a text amendment on its own.
Okay.
But that's a good point, because we did talk about a time frame.
I've actually got that already written in my notes to talk about making sure that we're doing the zone language the correct way.
Yeah, because that was one thing that I know planning commission went through a crap ton of time on that. So anyway. But-
So John will handle that in the.
Okay, but
amendment.
you don't get any sales tax though from what we're talking about. So.
Just read, just the commercial that's in there.
Okay, all right.
Yep, if you got ideas to bring forward for sales tax, we're always welcome. We invite a lot of businesses to join us there.
Okay, so Nicole Morgan, Weaver High School. With the questions that you guys asked, I just went and got some clarification. I'm just a teacher at Weaver. I work with the kids.
Hold up, just a teacher.
I'm just a teacher.
A teacher is big time.
I appreciate that, but I feel small time in here. But because I'm the one that works with the students on the daily basis, they asked us to bring our students here to the city offices. So I don't have an in-depth hand in what is discussed with the livestock board. So I did some calls and some digging. So for the auditor, they couldn't give me a name. They recommended talking to county commissioners. One point brought up, which is a good one, is why we're waiting to this point to ask for donations. The clarification that I got on that one was once the decision was made in December that the county was separating from the junior livestock, it took us 6 months to become an official entity. We are now officially Weaver Junior Livestock. Because of that 6 months, we couldn't do any checking or accounting processing up until that point. When that was official, then they made the decision to contact city councils to ask for donations. a gal named Cassie Joyner. She is a teacher out at Fremont. She is the one that set up all of these for us across the county. She said that when contacting North Ogden, she had some trouble getting a hold of people, so it took us a little bit to get on the agenda. And then this was my misunderstanding. We don't necessarily need the funds by the fair. We just are looking for the commitment for the donations. So if that helps at all in your discussion. Any other questions that I can find clarification about?
Are you a 501c3?
Yes,
So that's the designation that you have?
yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. Thanks for answering those questions for us.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Anyone else like to make a comment? John, do we have anyone online with their hand up or anything?
Not currently.
How about her lead?
Oh, we do now.
Okay,
We've got Susan Kilborn.
all right, let's hear it from Susan.
Guess who? Happy Tuesday night. Wow. You guys, you wore me out during those conversations. But still, here I am, Susan Kilborn, North Ogden citizen and self-appointed reporter on the vibe of North Ogden, Utah. I just want to say, I can't believe anybody didn't talk about Cherry Days tonight because it was the bomb. It was so awesome. I loved it. And from the beginning, I thought, no, this is not going to work. Nobody's going to want to do this for all these days. And I ended up being a volunteer for all these things. And now you're never going to get rid of me, ever, ever, ever. Volunteers, you made it happen. It was so good. I loved every minute of it. There's so many people, I can't mention all your names. You know who you are. And one other thing, for those of you who were in the parade with gigantic water cannons, who specifically found me and drenched me to the bone.
Who was that?
Don't interrupt me. Your time is coming in the future. Expect it when you don't expect it. One more comment on the suicide prevention presentation. I'm glad you brought that up. I've been involved in that in the future. A suggestion, you need to accentuate positivity about good mental health and keep the word suicide to a minimum. You don't want to drive down the street and see the word suicide. You want to see positivity to good mental health and do what you need to do for that. And also, Suave, I want you to know that I picked up on the fact that your partner in presentation called you lovely. So from now on, you are now lovely, Suave, Phil Swanson.
Thanks for that insight.
Lovely.
Thanks, Susan, for your comments. Always welcome.
Yep. Thank you guys for making Cherry Days just fabulous. I loved it.
I think we'll be pleasantly surprised. I've seen some initial information on the finances of it, and we'll await that accountability report back. All right, anyone else, John, online? Anyone else here? How many times are you going to comment tonight, Doug?
3.
Now your time, you can't accumulate, you know, this time.
Right. It's all, I got it. Okay. In response to Nicole Morphin's, this is the trust me thing. Appeal for $1,000. I know the benefit of learning to raise animals and how it teaches life lessons that can probably not be taught any other way. I was about ready to say, Nicole, here's my wallet, you know, let's take up a collection. Come on, we can get $1,000 out of the people in this room. That was my mood, okay, and my emotion. So here's my suggestion, and I hope that you view this as a constructive suggestion. Because the city's money isn't our money, it isn't your money, so to speak. It's all of our money to be spent in. And I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Surely, like I think you were thinking, there are some private, in fact, I know you said private donors that will be glad to say, here's $1,000, whatever it takes, let's get this done, you know? And so here's my constructive suggestion. Maybe for instances like this, or to chalk it up people, or people who have worthy, charitable, can I use that term? Causes. Have a list of people who have enough money that if they're properly approached, they would be willing to chip in $50, $100, $1,000. I know there are some really rich people in this city who probably, if properly approached, would say, you bet, done. You know, just have this list of people, so we're not asking the city to spend taxpayer money on worthy charitable causes. So that's just my suggestion. Yeah, maybe you've already got this list of people in your mind that you're going to approach and get this done.
Swanson's right on the
Get
top
this
of my
done.
list.
But get it
Right
done
on yours.
appropriately, not with city tax money. Okay, thank
I
you.
think we can help there. So. Okay, John, is there anyone online? All right, we're gonna move on to comments from the council or staff. No staff here other than you, John. You have a comment?
I do have three. One is the environmental hearing for the pond project will be on August 9th in this room from 4:30 till 6:30. The idea is that conceptually it will be kind of a 30-minute. It's not a formal presentation. There'll be tables. People can come and ask questions. It would be helpful to have council members here, one, to ask questions, but two, to answer questions. We might have a short presentation in a corner of the room so people could come through every 15 or 20 minutes and get update on where it's at, what it's going to look like. But that is scheduled, advertised. NRCS will be in the room. That's the Fed agency that administers the grant. As a follow-up, Councilman Dalpaz asked me about code enforcement and letters to new houses. There was some confusion in our departments about which department was taking that on, whether it was code enforcement or building. And so they are on top of that. They'll get those letters out. And then the final thing was I think I don't mean to speak ill of anyone who was here tonight and has left, but it is very hard for the city to interact with owner developers and owner builders because we end up being in the driving seat on everything. Where a good example is one of the applications tonight. Scott sent a very detailed email after the last time they approached the city, outlined everything they needed to do, and it didn't all happen. And not all of that was remembered and communicated. And so I think there is some frustration experienced by those individuals. We're doing everything we can. We really shouldn't be pushing projects through. We should be responding to applications. And so it's hard for us to feel like we're in the driver's seat and then also get the backlash. But Scott has been really good at working with folks, trying to help them across the finish line on things. And so I just wanted to, I know he's snuck off, but I just wanted to make sure that, that's expressed that he does a good job on trying to help people across the finish line.
John, and I know that we deferred putting in yards over the drought, et cetera, but that does not mean people don't have to cut down their weeds.
Correct.
We have a weed problem. People not complying with that. Just and frankly, we've got people throughout the city pretty often, and they ought to just make note of that and let code enforcement know.
And if you see it, letting code enforcement know by calling non-emergency dispatch is the right way to do it. And if someone calls you and expresses a concern, have them call non-emergency dispatch. That puts it in the police system in a way that they can follow through on all those calls.
Okay. Council, is there any other comments this evening? Councilmember Swanson and Councilmember Separate.
To Susan Kilborn's comment about the word suicide, that word will not appear on any of the banners that'll be on Washington. It'll all be more positive messaging, ask good questions, live on, those kinds of things. It'll all be positive. So that's a good point to make. And just wanted to clarify that. Over at Bicentennial Park, I've noticed over the last several nights, the light has become very dim that lights up the flags. I think it may be just the lens over the light that has become clouded. It looks like a plexiglass kind of lens. If we could look into that. And then Nicole, if you'll see me afterwards, I'll give you your first donation.
Thank you.
Okay, because I know that here in our community, we can easily raise $1,000 without having to touch taxpayer dollars. So if you'll see me right after the meeting, Doug, I appreciate that. I'd written it down just as soon as Nicole had made her initial presentation, and I'd be willing to bet there are others in this room that would be willing to donate, and I know there are others in the community. So if you'll see me afterwards, we'll get that.
Okay. All right. Any other, Councilmember Seven, you had a comment, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, council, what you're thinking about. The First Lady of North Ogden approached me about not having the time to really commit to the youth city council based on our schedule right now. What do you want us to do with the youth city council? Are we utilizing them enough to be able to have it?
I'd like to see us put out a call to see if there's somebody else that would do it. I think the youth council is a great thing, and if we can find a volunteer, I'd be willing to bet there's somebody out there that would be willing to make, or a couple of somebody's that in tandem could make that happen. I think I'd like to see us try that first.
She's a little bit busy right now. There's no doubt about it.
And these people with new houses.
Been here 2 years, so that's good. Okay, Councilmember Barker, you got something?
Yeah, just something that you mentioned, on our discussion with the RDA. So the fire district this year is paying $145,000 back to North Ogden's RDA, I believe. And we are having a $80,000 deficit, which is why we're raising taxes this year. When they say it's tax neutral, it's not exactly tax neutral because we gotta make up the difference.
No free lunch.
No.
So
I'll get paid for somewhere.
but I mean,
John?
our accountant may or may not be counting down the days till the RDA goes away.
And ask your accountant how much more money the district gets from all the RDA development that happened because those projects happened.
I've tried to talk to him about it.
Don't-
not giving.
Smith's is a good example, right? That
Yeah,
project
I know.
happened. So,
They have so much
it
money,
does.
they have to raise taxes.
yeah.
But no,
Sometimes
Yeah.
the more you get, the more you spend, John.
That's
I
true.
believe in
Pat-
education, don't get me wrong,
I think Patrick Ewing said that, right?
but these new schools are pretty dang nice compared to what I went to. All right.
Well,
You
we
think
use
you didn't think I went to school, Councilmember Delphas?
we use kiln fired brick now instead of mud.
don't know what it meant.
I thought maybe you thought I didn't go to school.
You actually went to school, a school that was demolished
Yeah,
recently.
had to clean up after I left. All right, anything else? With that, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Councilmember Ekstrom, I'd be looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Oh, she snuck off.
Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Go on the rest of the night, then.
We're here till midnight.